Hey, everybody. Welcome. It is yet another evening broadcast, and I'm opening a bottle of unnamed diet beverage because it's one of those days. I think, it's starting a little bit earlier than usual, so I think I can do one more unnamed caffeinated diet beverage before the day ends. So wish me luck on getting to sleep tonight. But yeah, we're going to have yet another late night conversation, so hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do it.
Second century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight, drinking my last unnamed diet beverage for today. It has been one of those days. I got up this morning, I got on the subway, I went to church, and all day I've been feeling the burn in my face from the spring allergies and the drowsiness from the rainy, foggy weather and struggling to keep my energy up. But I'm here with all of you, and I've got unnamed diet beverage. And the unnamed diet beverage does have caffeine in it. And we're starting a little earlier than usual. And I got up pretty early this morning. So I feel like it's okay to take one. And who knows, maybe we'll have a longer stream. Maybe this will give me the kick that I need, and I'll get my energy going. I've noticed with my allergies, it tends to, and the sun has just gone down. It's still a little bit light. It's like twilight here in New York City. I've noticed that when I have allergies, once it's night, all of a sudden my energy starts to come back. If I'm feeling drowsy from the allergies, once it's night, the energy comes back. So maybe I'll get my kick and get my second wind. My voice has been deeper lately. Because of the allergies. And that's true. I noticed that, but something's going on with my throat and whatever, but I can still talk. I haven't lost my voice, but it's a little bit deeper than usual. And that's good. I often have a very nasally voice, not right now. In fact, I'm speaking in my throat rather than my nose, and that's a good thing. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We're going to have a chat here tonight about a lot of different things. I guess I'll start out by saying that the way we generally do things on these streams, for those of you who may not be familiar, is that I give opening remarks about whatever it is I'm going to talk about. And then from there, we do a roll call. We find out who is on the other side of the camera, who's watching. Always very exciting. We've got people from all over the world and all over the United States. And then from there, we do just me answering questions for the rest of the night. Super chats, rumble rants. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, send me a super chat. I do want to say last night's show was phenomenal. You guys asked great questions. And, I was talking, I gave a presentation about why Eurasia is rising as the West is dying. So if you haven't had a chance to go watch last night's show, I do recommend it. The show last night, The Future is in Eurasia, episode, 717 or 716. It was pretty awesome. Hey, every so often I feel like I knock it out of the park. I hit a home run. And I think last night was one of those nights. It was a great show last night. So go watch it if you get a chance. Just a couple announcements that I'm making here. I've been telling everyone to mark their calendars for July 7th. July 7th in Washington, D.C. Official announcement coming out soon. We're going to be having a demonstration in Washington, D.C. The theme is defend working families, oppose war and empire, in reverse order. Oppose war and empire, defend working families. Poster and other information coming soon. It's going to be a great event. Details are coming. We're in the process of reserving a permit, things like that. And it's going to be a great event. That's the next big thing that we have in the works. So I'm very excited about that. In addition to that, I do want to mention a couple different things that we've got going on. A friend of mine has made a petition to oppose sanctions on countries. A friend of ours named Phil, new member of the Senate for Political Innovation, he has made a petition to oppose sanctions on countries that impact the ability of those countries to use healthcare. So go sign that petition. I see, it's an initiative that our friend started, and it's up to 17 signatures. So go and sign it. I think that would be a great thing that you could do. Healthcare shouldn't be limited by economic sanctions on countries. I think we can all agree about that. The way that they've limited the access of Cuba and Venezuela and Iran and North Korea and Russia and China to certain healthcare medicines with their sanctions, that should be opposed. So go ahead and sign that. The Center for Political Innovation is marching ahead. People are joining all the time. New members are coming along, so we'd be happy to have you. Our membership is well above 150. I think last time I checked, it was 157, 158, something like that. And we're marching ahead. We just had a great retreat in Vermont last weekend with 30 people. It was absolutely phenomenal. Shout out to everyone who was there. I think it was a tremendous weekend. I'm just going to get into my opening remarks. So if there's something you want me to talk about, send a super chat or send a Rumble rant, because that's what makes the second half of the show happen. It's all you guys. It's all me engaging with you guys that makes the second half of the show happen. So I'll do my opening remarks. Then we have the roll call, and then I answer your questions. That's the way this show works. So let's do it, folks. For opening remarks tonight, I wanted to talk about a few different current events that are happening. One of which is, that's the title of the stream. At this point, and this is a news item you can find on RT.com. NATO using war games to prepare for conflict, Moscow. The U.S.-led bloc is holding its largest exercises in decades near the Russian border, the Foreign Ministry has pointed out. NATO's largest exercise since the Cold War are being held near Russia's border, indicating that the U.S.-led bloc is seriously preparing for a potential conflict with Moscow, said Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. The steadfast defender drills, featuring some 90,000 troops from 32 NATO country member states and 1,100 combat vehicles, started in late January and will end in May. According to the war game scenario, the coalition's actions against Russia are being practiced using all the instruments, including hybrid and conventional weapons, Zakharova said in a statement on Saturday. We have to admit that NATO is seriously preparing for a potential conflict with us, Zakharova said. The diplomat was commenting on accusations made by NATO earlier this week that Russia was allegedly carrying out hybrid activities on member countries' soil, which they insist constitute a threat to their security. These actions include sabotage, acts of violence, cyber and electronic interference, disinformation campaigns, and other hybrid actions, the bloc claimed on a statement on Thursday. Zakharova dismissed the allegations as disinformation and an attempt to shift public attention away from NATO's own activities. The bloc and the leadership of individual member states are increasing the degree of anti-Russian hysteria in order to justify the unprecedented scale of officials said. According to the diplomat, it was NATO that launched a hybrid war against Russia in all operational environments and in geographic directions. In addition, the bloc members are actively involved in the Ukraine conflict. They are providing Kiev not only with financial support, but also with weapons and intelligence data, which are then used to strike civilians and civilian infrastructure in Russia. Back in March, Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev said that NATO's Steadfast Defender 2024 exercises were increasing tensions and destabilizing the situation in the world by simulating a military confrontation with Moscow. The official described the bloc as an important tool employed by the U.S. to exert and influence other nations. NATO has come directly to Russia's western border and is preparing for future conflicts, he stressed. In recent months, multiple senior officials from NATO member states claimed that Russia was planning to launch an attack against the military bloc in the coming years. Russia has repeatedly denied those claims, with President Vladimir Putin saying the country has no interest geopolitically, economically, or militarily in waging war against NATO. So, some people might look at this and say, well, these are just military exercises, right? This is just war games. This is the army. They're practicing, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're practicing all-out war against Russia with 90,000 troops, with missiles, with all kinds of weapons. And they're doing it right on Russia's border. Now, think about that. Could you imagine if Russia were right on the American border with Canada, practicing an all-out war against America? How do you think we would feel about it? Could you imagine if China were in Mexico with 90,000 troops practicing an all-out war against America? I think at that point, we would have a serious concern. And these war games are a method of intimidation, and they always have been, right? You know, it is a show of force. It is a threat, and U.S. officials know that. And of course, they're trying to distract from that by talking about, oh, you know, there was some computer hacking. We know Russia did it. Just trust us. We know Russia did it. You know, and they're trying to, you know, say this and that. But, you know, you look at the details of the situation. You've got 90,000 NATO troops right on Russia's border practicing the drills, the formations, the moving of missiles, the moving of airplanes, etc., just like they would do if an actual war happened. And, you know, this is how they've intimidated, you took the words out of my mouth. This is how they've intimidated North Korea for years, right? It used to be every year the USA would stage these war games on the Korean Peninsula where they would just take all the South Korean military and all the American military and march it right up to the demilitarized zone, right up to the DMZ, fly all the airplanes, and they would stop. And if you're North Korea, right, you're thinking, how do we know they're actually going to stop this time? Right? I mean, and if you think about it, right? I mean, again, you know, if all the enemy troops and all the enemy army are getting in perfect formation and marching right up to your border, and they say it's just war games, don't worry, and they march right up to their border, how do you know that this won't be the time that it's not actually war games? They actually attack you. You know, and of course, you know, your enemy is going to say, well, we would tell you, of course, but they're your enemy. Are they going to tell you? No. And these war games, these provocative war games where they rehearse the all-out destruction of North Korea, that was one of the main things that was a step forward when Donald Trump met with Kim Jong-un, is there was a freeze in these war games. And now they've restarted under Biden's leadership. Biden has cooperated with the South Korean government to restart the war games. And it looks like since January, they have been engaging in these provocative war games with the NATO forces right on Russia's border. And again, this context is never given. And it's also important to note that in addition to the fact that there are, you know, there are NATO war games being practiced on Russia's border. The U.S. government is arming the government in Ukraine. The government in Ukraine, the USA has been giving them arms and weapons for years. The USA brought them to power, destabilized Ukraine in 2042, etc. And now the Ukrainian forces have been carrying out attacks on Russian soil. There was the assassination of a number of people. They have a kill list of people that they considered to be targets. They murdered Daria Dugina. They murdered another journalist. And then it looks like this horrendous terrorist attack that happened at the Crocus City Hall concert. It looks like that was, carried out by Ukrainian forces with prior knowledge of the United States. The USA made an announcement ahead of time that there was going to be some kind of attack. And the terrorists who carried out that horrendous attack were trying to flee to the Ukrainian border, where there were Ukrainian security services there to meet them. And in addition to that, there have been missiles shot onto Russian territory, drones, etc. So already we have the United States indirectly attacking Russia via Ukraine. And now we have the United States and the other NATO countries rehearsing and practicing for a straight up military confrontation with Russia. In addition to that, there's talks of sending European Union troops to Ukraine because the Ukrainian military is completely depleted at this point. At this point, the Ukrainian military, they've dragged every man that they possibly can into the conflict. And there's nobody left. It's like the mobilization law is ridiculous. So now they're talking about sending European Union forces into Ukraine to back up the Ukrainian government because Ukraine has just completely, been destroyed. They lost the war. At this point, Crimea, Donbass, Donetsk, Lugansk, they're staying with Russia. Now, Odessa is still contested. At this point, the war in Ukraine is pretty much over, except the United States is prolonging it while the United States is carrying out these very provocative drills right on Russia's border. But they want us to believe that Russia is somehow the aggressor in this situation. The United States topples the Ukrainian government, installs a fanatical anti-Russian government. That fanatical anti-Russian government starts bombing the people of the eastern regions who declare independence. Russia negotiates a peace agreement, and that government ignores the peace agreement and just keeps bombing them for 8 years. Finally, Russia has to move its forces in to protect the people of Donetsk and Lugansk. And I have pointed out many times the idea that this is unprovoked, the idea that the conflict in Ukraine is purely some kind of, it's just Putin is trying to be a conqueror. That's just so ridiculous. It's just so utterly ridiculous. There has been Ukraine bombing and murdering the people that it does not, within its own borders, that it considers to be Russians. And it's been fining them for speaking their own language, etc. There's a monument that's been created to all the children who've actually died. And I've shown this monument over and over again on these streams because no one talks about it, right? Ukraine has been murdering Russian-speaking children for 8 years straight, while Russia has just been begging Ukraine to adhere to the agreement that they signed, the Minsk Accords, the Minsk Agreement. They haven't done it. And so now, we have this situation. It's like mainstream media doesn't care that these children exist, right? All of a sudden, their hearts bleed for Ukraine. But these children who've been dying for 8 years straight, they don't exist in mainstream media. And it's really, really frustrating to watch that coverage, right? So the whole situation in Ukraine was completely provoked and arranged by the United States. Russia did everything possible to hold off intervening, but they had to protect these children. They had to step in after Ukraine wouldn't, honor its agreement and stop bombing the Russian-speaking people of the eastern regions, stop, the food blockades, etc. And now they tell the world that Russia is an aggressor, and then they use that to launch terrorist attacks against Russia. to wage all-out economic warfare against Russia with crazy sanctions, and now they're practicing an all-out war against Russia right on Russia's border. NATO is practicing for World War III right on Russia's border. But they still want us to believe that somehow Russia is the aggressor. And their new talking point is, oh, if Ukraine loses, Russia is going to take over NATO countries. Why would they do that? Why in the world would they do that? They held off as long as they possibly could from going into Ukraine. They didn't want to go into Ukraine, but it was made clear they had no other choice, right? And they don't want an all-out confrontation with a NATO country. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. The idea that Russia, wants to take over the NATO countries or something. I mean, this is like the domino theory from the Vietnam War. It is absolutely outrageous. It is absolutely outrageous. Russia is not the aggressor. Meanwhile, we have a situation where, and I guess it will transition to other events that are happening in the world. In the United States, we have these ongoing Palestine protests because Israel is bombing Gaza, and they are just bombarding Gaza, killing people in Gaza. It's just relentless. And the whole world is saying to Israel to stop murdering Palestinians, ceasefire now, and they won't do it. And they won't let up. There's even been a UN resolution, a UN Security Council resolution calling for a Ramadan ceasefire. Israel completely ignored it. Israel's bombing hospitals. Israel has killed American civilian volunteers. It is. I mean, they've killed journalists. Children in Gaza are having, surgery without anesthetic. I mean, what Israel is doing to the Palestinians right now is an absolute crime against the world. And the whole world is condemning what Israel is doing, and Israel keeps doing it. And the United States keeps saying, oh, there's no evidence that this is genocide. Oh, there's no possible way that what Israel's doing can be unacceptable. That has been the U.S. line from the beginning. And that's gone on since October. Israel's been on this killing spree. And they've been trying to draw, an all-out regional war out of this. They've been trying to create a full-on regional conflict. They've been attacking Iran, Iranian embassies, Iranian consulates, Iranian generals, Iranian military people aligned with Iran throughout the region. They're trying to turn this into an all-out regional war. The United States, it seems to some degree or other, doesn't want that. And it seems like the rest of the world, even Israel's allies, don't want that. So Israel is mercilessly killing people in Gaza, and now Israel is mercilessly trying to start an all-out war. So there is a protest movement on the college campuses in the United States, which I have been visiting. I've been to Columbia University many times. I went to City University of New York in Harlem. I even went to the May 1st rally that was had, by all the Palestine Solidarity people in Foley Square. I've been covering these demonstrations. And these demonstrators, I mean, it is particularly crazy what's being said about them, because we are being told, first it was that these demonstrators were anti-Semitic, right? And at this point, there's hundreds of thousands of students that have set up encampments all over the United States. At first, we were told these students were anti-Semitic, but I went to Columbia, and almost every single protester I spoke to was Jewish. And I went to the protest in Foley Square, and there was an endless amount of signs where people had Stars of David. I am a Jew against Israel. I am a Jew for Palestine. There at every single rally I've been to, there have been members of Orthodox Jewish communities that oppose Israel. I interviewed Rabbi Weiss a number of times, and I mean, it's completely malarkey. So now the next talking point, they kind of given up on calling these students anti-Semitic because they're not, and most of them are Jews. The next talking point now is that these students are terrorists. They're terrorists. Now, I don't know how they get this, right? But they're somehow, these students, many of them are transgender. These are woke people, right? These are woke college kids. But somehow we're supposed to believe that they're jihadists from Hamas and ISIS, right? ISIS has never attacked Israel, but let's not get into the facts. Let's not worry about the facts, right? we're being told by Fox News and by members of Congress and others that these students are all radical jihadists. They're all Islamic fundamentalists, which is outrageous. Many of them are Jews. Many of them are gay. Many of them are transgender. These are, if anybody is not an Islamic fundamentalist, it is these people, right? This is not an Islamist or Muslim demonstration in any conceivable way. However, that is the new talking point of right-wing media, so much so that there's a professor at Columbia University who is an advisor to the New York City Police Department, and she actually gave a statement about how there's terrorism. The reason the NYPD had to raid Columbia University, violently arrest all these students, was because of terrorism. I mean, this is the statement that we heard.
It is not about students expressing ideas. It is about a change in tactics that presents a concern and a normalization and mainstreaming of rhetoric. And I'm not just talking about language, I'm now talking about tactics, and that's what shifted our response yesterday. But a normalization and mainstreaming of rhetoric associated with terrorism that has now become pretty common on college campuses, right? You see people.
That sentence she just said is completely incoherent. That is complete incoherent gibberish. But there's a lot more to this, so I'm going to let her get through it, and then we'll go through it again.
Wearing headbands associated with foreign terrorist organizations. This happened in October when you had a viral TikTok reissuing of Osama bin Laden's 2002 letter to America. So that's a larger concern. It's separate from what happened yesterday, but they're related. We do not want ideas. We do not want campuses, which are where people are supposed to be learning and being in a conducive environment for all of the things that we do in schools, being turned into places where people are committing vandalism, property damage, and committing crimes.
So that gibberish you just heard from this is a professor. These are her students who just got arrested and beaten up. And she's a professor who specializes in terrorism studies and cooperates with the New York City Police Department. And she's explaining why it was necessary to go beat up and arrest all these students. And she starts out saying it's not about language and it's not about ideas. And then she goes on to describe people having ideas. This is ridiculous. And if you listen to what she says, she starts out, this is not about ideas. This is about rhetoric. Listen to what she says. It's like she's fucking with you, right? She assumes that mainstream media is just going to give her a pass, which they will. And so she says, oh, we're not about suppressing people's ideas, but we're very concerned about the ideas that people are expressing. So we feel a need to suppress them.
This is not about students expressing ideas.
It's not about students expressing ideas.
It is about a change in tactics that presents a concern and a normalization and mainstreaming of rhetoric.
Rhetoric are ideas. Rhetoric is words.
And I'm not just talking about language.
That's what rhetoric is. Rhetoric is language, right? So it's a normalization of rhetoric. I'm not talking about language. Yeah, you are talking about language because that's what that is. Do you see how they're messing with you right now? This is completely ridiculous. It's not about language. It's about rhetoric. It's not about their ideas. This is
now talking about tactics, and that's what shifted our response yesterday. But a normalization and mainstreaming of rhetoric.
A normalization and mainstreaming of rhetoric. That sounds like words and ideas. Normalization and mainstreaming of rhetoric. So more people are talking in ways that you do not approve of, but that's not about language, right? It's not about ideas. There's just more people. There's normalization and mainstreaming of rhetoric. So more people are saying things that you don't like. How is that not about ideas? How is that not about language?
Associated with terrorism.
They're associated with terrorism. Well, geez, I bet if you go to any club in New York City, any Irish bar, You can hear them singing songs about Bobby Sands, who was a member of the Provisional Irish Republican Army, which was a designated terrorist organization. You can hear them, singing songs about the IRA and about, SAM missiles and about all of that. You can hear music associated with legally designated Irish terrorist organizations at any Irish bar in New York City. And I don't see you, raiding the Irish bars and clearing them out. And in addition to that, right, there are plenty of designated terrorist organizations that were trying to overthrow the Syrian government. ISIS emerged out of the anti-Assad movement, but yet I never saw them arrest and raid any of the anti-Assad, anti-Syrian government protests that have been going on, even though the rhetoric of overthrowing Assad was tied in with terrorism. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous.
That has now become pretty common on college campuses, right?
So what? People on college campuses are saying things that you don't like. That is not anything but freedom of speech. That is not anything but language. That is not anything but ideas. Right? I mean, this is a crackdown on freedom of speech. If you're not concerned about what students are saying, then at that point, you shouldn't be talking about ideas. You shouldn't be talking about rhetoric. This is very clearly they don't like what these students are saying. That's what's going on here.
You see people wearing headbands.
Whoa, they're wearing headbands. Are headbands weapons? I believe headbands are a form of free speech. Free speech doesn't have to be words. It can be T-shirts. It can be written messages. It can be clothing. So headbands, but it's not about rhetoric. It's not about ideas, but it's about headbands. I mean, are these violent headbands? They're like forcing onto other people's heads, grabbing people and putting a headband on their head or something. Give me a break. There is no way that headbands justify a police crackdown.
Associated with foreign terrorist organizations.
Okay, terrorist headbands, right? I mean, this is just utter silliness. Headbands associated with foreign terrorist organizations. I mean, there you go. I mean, you better publish a list of different headbands, because I see people running in the parks of New York City all the time wearing headbands. Now, how do I know those aren't terrorist headbands, right? This is getting to be a little bit silly. I have at one point heard that Zionists claimed that Yasser Arafat, his keffiyeh, his scarf that he wore around his neck, was secretly a coded message. It was in the shape of Palestine or something. This is that level of crazy, right? Someone shakes hands in the wrong way or makes the wrong gesture, and it's a dog whistle to prove they're a Nazi. This is that level of paranoid. This is like Da Vinci Code level cuckoo.
This happened in October when you had a viral...
Well, no, it didn't happen in October because these protests didn't start until a few weeks ago. So something that happened in October on TikTok has absolutely nothing to do with these students. Let me just point that out. She's talking about something that happened back in October when there was a lot of people on TikTok highlighting one of Osama bin Laden's letters, critiquing U.S. foreign policy. That happened back in October. Okay? How does that have anything to do with stuff happening in real life right now? Something happened on TikTok back in October, and that makes it okay to arrest a bunch of people for saying completely different things in real life in May. That doesn't make any sense.
TikTok reissuing of Osama bin Laden's 2002 letter to America.
That has nothing to do with these protests. This is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this woman's a college professor. Do they not teach, logical fallacies?
So that's a larger concern.
No, it's not a larger concern. It has absolutely nothing to do with these protesters. It has absolutely nothing to do with them being arrested.
From what happened yesterday, but they're related.
No, they're not related. They are not related. All kinds of crazy people say all kinds of crazy shit on the internet all the time, and it has nothing to do with people peacefully protesting in New York City. I mean, this is it's not related. No, it is. Two people both don't like U.S. foreign policy. That's about it. That's about as close as they're related.
We do not want ideas.
You do not want ideas. Honesty. It is about ideas. She said it was not about ideas earlier. Do you remember that? She said it's not about ideas. It's not about language. And now she's saying we do not want ideas.
We do not want campuses.
We do not want ideas. We do not want campuses.
Which are where people are supposed to be learning and being in a conducive environment for all of the things that we do in schools, being turned into places where people are committing vandalism, property damage.
Well, vandalism's illegal, property damage,
And committing crimes.
Crimes are already illegal. So that has nothing to do with any of the previous things she said. Now, you look at that statement that she just gave, and you have to keep in mind that's not just some random, like, ditzy Zionist or something, right? That's not, like, the Trump Tower fangirl, committee. That's a professor. That is a professor who is also employed by the New York City Police Department to write their terrorism policies. And in addition to that, the New York City Police Department, the specific wing that she works for, the anti-terrorism wing, has offices in Tel Aviv. Right? So think about this. This woman is basically a foreign agent. She's a foreign lobbyist, and she's helping set NYPD policy regarding protesters. She's helping make the case for arrests based on things that people say and headbands that people wear that she doesn't approve of. And she's so sloppy in doing so that she cannot distinguish between language and action. She says it's not about language, it's about rhetoric. It's not about ideas where people can say things. It's not about what people say. It's about the normalization of rhetoric and people wearing headbands. It's like a mind fuck. Like, I'm probably being too generous, but I feel like she's messing with us, right? I mean, I feel like she can't be that stupid. She can't be that stupid. And then she's saying, and it's because of stuff people did on TikTok back in October. It has nothing to do with what's going on at Columbia University. I find it to be infuriating. And I mean, I've been telling people that, these protesters are not perfect. Okay. And they're not, right. They're not big fans of CPI. They're not big fans of me. They make a big point of telling me that, even though I am probably, of all the news networks that are there to cover them, I am probably the most sympathetic. I agree with their cause. I've literally spoken at anti-Israel conferences in Iran. I've written a book supporting the Houthis. I'm pretty clearly on their side, but a lot of them have heard on the internet that I'm a bad guy. Doesn't matter. Right. They're right. This cause is just. These students want their college to divest from Israel. They want Israel to stop bombing Gaza. They are right. The cause is just. I have been orienting CPI members from around the country to go to these rallies and look for people with potential. Look for people who seem like they are able to understand a deeper political message and try to win them over and not announce themselves as CPI, because that'll just lead to you being, isolated. The Center for Political Innovation, we would like to recruit the better people among these protests, but we recognize the people that are running these protests, unfortunately, are controlled opposition. They are woke. They are woke protest managers, dissent managers, and they very much want to make the protests. And I do believe that there is a big effort to make these protests as unattractive to the average American as possible. And I've said that on here. And I mean, I think many of the protesters are very sincere in what they want, but the people stage managing the rallies are doing everything they can to make them not aimed at the masses of people to make them hostile to the American people. But regardless, that doesn't mean the crackdown on these students is justified. That doesn't mean these students deserve to get kicked out of their school. That doesn't mean these students deserve to get arrested and beaten up. And, you know, even if these students are assholes, which some of them are, not all of them, but some of them clearly are, you know, they're on the right side of an issue, and they're expressing their freedom of speech, and they're protesting for a cause which is just, which is the Palestinians. So we have to support them. And many people have pointed out that this is the new January 6th. January 6th was a situation where they found the craziest Trump supporters, right? And they put a guy in a stupid buffalo costume and painted his face, and they found a couple other crazy people, and they made them the poster child for people who support Donald Trump, and they let them into a building, and they used that to then crack down on Trump supporters and have the left support it. And I didn't support it, right? I have always been consistent in saying that the woman who was shot and killed in the Capitol, she shouldn't have been killed. She did not have a gun, right? She was unarmed, and she should not have been killed. And I have said that these sentences that they are giving the January 6th defendants are insane. However, they found a lot of very unattractive, angry, crazy-looking people and made them the symbol, the poster child for the movement, right? What did Buffalo Head look like, right? I'm going to put up January 6th buffalo horns. They made this guy, right? I'll put him on the screen. They made this guy in his crazy, like, Native American costume, the QAnon shaman. They made him the poster child of the movement. These are all crazy, racist Trump supporters, and look, they're yelling at police, and they're all awful. And so they got leftists and socialists that are supposed to be against the police, that are supposed to be against the police state. They got them to support all kinds of heavy repression, jailing dissidents, etc. And it looks to me like these Palestine protests are the same thing, but aimed at right-wingers. Right now, right-wingers feel like they're being silenced. Right-wing conservatives, Trump supporters, libertarians feel like they're being suppressed. And so they're using these students that are very, very woke and very, very foul-mouthed and very, very angry, and they're against the American flag and things like that. They're using them to be the negative poster child to get right-wing people back into the mode of cheering for police as they arrest people. They're trying to take away all of our rights at this time, okay? And they are using moments like this where they polarize the country. They are using this to set the stage for a crackdown on all of us. And I am just as critical of the Trump supporting crowd as I am of the Palestine protesters. The Trump supporting crowd believes in free market capitalism largely. The Trump supporting crowd supports Israel and hates Muslims largely. I mean, there's plenty of problems on the right. But I'm telling you that the way the media manipulated the events of January 6th and the way the media is manipulating the events surrounding the Palestine protests, it's the same playbook. It is the exact same playbook. For example, if you turned on CNN and if you saw any of the coverage of January 6th, you would have thought everyone there had a Confederate flag, right? Because there were people in the crowd who are neo-Confederate and were waving Confederate flags. They did not show you the loads of Israeli flags on January 6th, right? And I will show you. There were loads of Israeli flags at January 6th. And if you don't believe me, take a look. Take a look. Here's a picture of them, right? Right here. They never mention that January 6th, the crowd of, deplorables or whatever we're supposed to call them, these awful, abominable people, they never mention that many of them had Israeli flags, right? But some of them did have Confederate flags. So you would have thought everyone there had a Confederate flag. They did not mention that the crowds at January 6th had all kinds of Miami Cubans among them, had all kinds of, it was all kinds of right-wing anti-communist folks from many different ethnic communities and constituencies, etc. They didn't mention that. They just said, oh, they're all racist. They all have Confederate flags. Well, I mean, there was a lot of Asian folks that are supporters of the Falun Gong, the right-wing anti-China religious sect that were there. I think what's his name? Sean Moon, the founder of Sanctuary Church, one of the right-wing, it's like a split from the Unification Church, the son of Reverend Sun Myung Moon. He was there. He had a bus of his supporters. A lot of them were Asian, Korean, and Japanese. They didn't mention that. No, these are all a bunch of racist white people. It's the exact same way they're now trying to tell us that a crowd of college kids, let's look up a poster of these, college protesters, right? College protesters, Palestine. I mean, they want to tell you that these protesters, these college protesters, that they're all Jew haters. They're all like vile Jew hating, the people that are just focused on killing Jews. And they want to now tell you they're all members of Hamas. And it's like, this is nuts. This is just not reality, right? They're trying to convince you that, that all of these students are Jew haters, anti-Semites, even though, especially at Columbia, the majority of the people I spoke to were Jewish. And they're trying to tell you that they're somehow involved in Islamic organizations when these crowds are about as gay and transgender and lesbian as you can get. I mean, look at this. Look at this. This is City College, right? I mean, this is a photo from City Times of the protest crowd at City College, right? I take a look. This is the crowd at City College of New York. Do you think that these people are out there to kill the Jews? I don't think so. Do you think that a crowd that looks like this, that their main motivation is that they want to have the Holocaust happen again? Does this to you look anything like an anti-Semitic rally? It doesn't look that way to me. And on top of that, does this look like an Islamist demonstration? Do you think these students want Sharia law? Look at this crowd. You really believe these students with their Free Palestine, Save Palestine, do you really believe that these students are going to try and create an Islamic state in America? I mean, how stupid do they fucking think we are? How stupid do they think we are? We're supposed to believe that these students are Al-Qaeda and that these students are neo-Nazi Jew haters. They're neither of that. They're just woke college kids. They're annoying. Sure, not all of them. Some of them are really fucking annoying, but they're not killing Jews. They're not terrorists. Come on, right? And it's like the idea that these students are such a threat to democracy and such a threat to our freedom that they're going to, they're going to, take, that we have to lock down the campuses to stop them. Seriously, look at this crowd. Do you see anyone in this crowd who looks like an anti-Semite or a neo-Nazi? Do you see anyone in this crowd who looks like an Islamist, an advocate of Sharia law? Give me a break. Give me a break. And it's the same shit with January 6th, right? Right? January 6th. Right? January 6th, let's take a look at that crowd. Again, they want you to believe that everyone on January 6th, all of them are these dangerous Trump supporters, right? White nationalists, etc. Like, these are the people in the Capitol that we were supposed to be afraid of. We were supposed to be afraid of these dangerous people, right? Again, they showed you Buffalo Head, and they want you to think Buffalo Head represents all the protesters. This is a photo from inside the Capitol. These were people in the Capitol on January 6th. Are you afraid of these people? Are they going to hurt you? Do you feel threatened by these people? There's a girl, she's got a shirt for Duke University. There's another girl who's got her kind of winter coat on because it was January and it was cold. There's a dude with sunglasses on and a MAGA hat. Like, does this scare you at all? Do you think these people, these people are all in the Capitol, do you think they all deserve 20 years? Look at this. I bet you at least every single one of these people in the picture got arrested, at least had the FBI come to your house. Now, do you think that is justified? Do you think this girl in the Duke shirt, is she going to hurt you? Right? Is she somebody that you desperately need to be protected from? Facebook and Twitter have got to start silencing people to protect you from the girl in the Duke shirt. Seriously. Do you think that the girl in the white hat and in the puffy coat, you know what I mean? Yeah, is she scared? Does she give you nightmares? Right? Is this the Ku Klux Klan? Right? Is she gonna, go on a night ride and lynch people? No. This is so ridiculous, right? And it's they want us to hate. They want us to fear other Americans, and they want us to hate other Americans. That is what this is about. And it is about justifying state repression that will violate all of our rights, right? And that is why we shouldn't fall for it. I got to say, I am really disappointed in Tulsi Gabbard. I am amazingly disappointed in Tulsi Gabbard. The stuff that she's saying is so stupid. She's putting out there the idea that these students are somehow tied in with Hamas. These students are somehow tied in with the terrorist groups, right? Again, all right, here's another picture from January 6th. Be afraid. Get ready. Get ready to be triggered. This is people inside of the U.S. Capitol, right? This is what we need to be afraid of. This is what we should be utterly terrified of. See that? Are you scared? There's a Trump guy. He's wearing a mask. He's trying to protect us from COVID. And he's sitting in a chair, and he's got a Trump flag around his neck. And there's a woman there, and she's got a sign that says, "The children cry out for justice," and she's pulling out her phone. Are you scared of these people? Do these people deserve to be in prison for 40 fucking years? No. No, they do not. No, they do not. These people are probably very wrong about immigration. These people are probably very wrong about Islam and Muslims. These people are probably very, very wrong about economics and what they think would make our economy stronger. But should I be terrified? Should I shit my pants over these people? No, I should not. No, I should not. And again, let's go back to the Palestine protesters, right? Let's go back to the Palestine protesters, since they're the latest, one that we're supposed to be scared of. These are the latest extremists that we should be just utterly, utterly terrified of, right? Again, here's the first picture. I just typed in Colombia, Palestine protests. This is the first picture that came up, the first one, right? Let's take a look at this picture, right? Take a look at the picture. All right, look at that. You got a red-haired girl in a sweater. You got a woman with curly black hair, right? You got an Asian American college girl in a jacket, right? Do any of these people look scary to you? Maybe the ones with their faces covered up, and that's because they don't want to get doxxed and they don't want to get expelled from their university from participating. I'm not scared of these kids. Right? They don't scare me. They might not like me if they met me. They might, have seen a YouTube video, told them I'm a bad person because Thought Slime said so. But other than that, I'm not afraid of these kids. They're fine. You really believe these students are a threat to democracy? You really believe Jewish students are like hiding under their beds? Oh my God, I can't go to class. I'm afraid of other Jewish students who disagree with me about Israel. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, give me a break. You really believe these students are anti-Semitic? That this is a Jew-hating rally? You really believe that this is all inspired by Hamas. This is all infiltrated and set up by Hamas outside agitators. You really, I mean, this is the first picture that came up. I typed in Palestine protests, Colombia. That's the first picture. Are you scared, right, of college kids wearing masks to keep from getting COVID? I mean, give me a break. People disagreeing with me is violence. Exactly. Right. Exactly. I mean, I can point to some other examples. Here's another picture. Again, get ready. Be afraid. Be afraid. This is another picture of the crowd at Columbia. Be afraid. Be terrified. Be terrified. Here we go. The next Columbia picture of the crowd. These are the people that are a big threat to our national security. You ready? Look at this. Oh my God. Are you scared of these people? Are these people a threat to your freedom? Are these people anti-Semites, neo-Nazis, threatening Jewish students? Are these people Hamas terrorists? Are these people secretly part of Osama bin Laden's TikTok meme or something? No. Okay? And I mean, the fact that anyone says that with a straight face should make you angry, right? These students might be unpleasant to talk to. They might be obnoxiously woke. They probably are obsessed with the trans issue. They probably will look for anything that you can say to be politically incorrect so they can point a finger at you and call you racist, but they're not going to harm you in any conceivable way, right? I mean, yeah, they're wearing masks. They're so nonviolent and they're so afraid of disease. They're wearing fucking masks. It's probably because they don't want to get doxxed by the right-wing media that's been, preventing students from getting jobs. But regardless, these are not terrorists, okay? And if you are, I have been to these protests and I have spoken to these people. You might disagree with them. You might find them a little annoying and woke, but you should not fear for their safety. They are not terrorists. They are not anti-Semites. They are not a threat to our public safety. Give me a break. Give me a break. Give me a break. Right. Exactly. Right. A lot of the students are very scared to be interviewed because they don't want to have their reputation destroyed by the pro-Israel forces out there that just kind of target anyone who says anything pro-Palestine. And I forgive me if I went on for quite a long time, but it must be said because I'm seeing on the left and on the right the exact same thing. The left was convinced that all Trump supporters and all the January 6 people were all Nazis and Hitler and we were all going to die. And no, we weren't. And they used that to crack down on our rights. And the Party of Socialism and Liberation and Brian Becker were the worst on that. Brian Becker and his law firm and his allies, they referred to the January 6 protests as sedition. They said that Biden didn't arrest enough people, right? It's like they've jailed like every grandma who walked into that Capitol building and given them 20 years, but it's not enough, right? So PSL, and now I'm seeing the Tulsi Gabbard folks and a lot of the folks in the Trump camp that were more anti-war are now saying these students are Hamas, that they're anti-Semites, blah, blah, blah. It's all a lie. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. That's what I'm urging you to do. Just don't fall for it. Okay? And we are headed for a long-term crisis of capitalism, right? We are in a long-term crisis of capitalism. And they are trying to lock down our country into a low-wage police state. And living standards are dropping, and the country is just rotting internally. And in order to get us to accept their high-tech dark ages where we own nothing and we're happy about it, where we live in a pod and eat bugs, in order to do that, they're going to have to set up a police state. And the red team versus blue team mentality, where instead of making it the establishment versus the anti-establishment, they make it red team versus blue team. That seems to be the strategy that they're using. I don't support the police murdering anyone. I don't think police should carry out extrajudicial executions. I think the police, if they see someone committing a crime, or they have an arrest warrant for them, they should arrest them, but they should not kill them on the spot because they think they had a gun. And that includes, the woman on January 6th, and that includes Sean Bell and Ramarley Graham. And I don't believe in police state repression. I don't think that Facebook and Twitter have the right to suppress my political opinion. If the government is facilitating Facebook and Twitter and coordinating with them, then they need to be balanced and allow all political views equal opportunity, right? Because that's my tax dollars, and the government shouldn't be picking winners and losers and what opinions get promoted and what opinions don't, right? I don't think that we should have a situation where people get criminalized and arrested for their political views. I don't think people should be declared terrorists for engaging in peaceful protests. I don't think people should, get 20 years in prison for trespassing in a building or get dragged out and beaten up by the police because they trespassed into a building. I just don't think that's right. And maybe they trespassed because they like Trump. Maybe they trespassed because they like Palestine. Palestine's better than Trump, in my view, but I want to have freedom of speech in the United States. That's what I want. I want us to have freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. I want us to not lose our rights. And I maintain that position. And I am very firm in my belief that we should not have a low-wage police state in this country, that people should have their rights. And I'm consistent in that. And I'm honest in that. And, and I have said on these streams many times, we're headed for the anti-woke blowback. That's where we're headed right now. The anti-woke blowback is coming. And, the woke thing, they used woke to mobilize people to be in favor of regime change operations and in favor of cancel culture and silencing Trump supporters. And now they're using anti-woke. And they're going to use the anti-woke blowback to suppress people that are critical of Israel, to suppress people that are sympathetic to China, to suppress people who perhaps are critical of the military, etc. And we should oppose both, right? And that the worst thing we could do is try to give up our position within anti-woke. We should, because many of the people that are anti-woke are also anti-war and anti-establishment. And the untold story that is obvious to anybody who hangs out in Republican circles is that there are loads of anti-Israel Republicans, especially among the youth. The Republican media may have circled its wagons, to support Israel. But Candace Owens certainly didn't, and there are plenty of anti-Israel Trumpers. There are plenty of anti-Israel folks on the right, and they are trying to pretend they don't exist, and they are trying to change the conversation, but they exist. There are plenty of people in the Trump camp who are genuinely anti-war, who are genuinely populistic and really confused, but they don't support what is now being mainstreamed as conservative politics. And we need to fight for anti-imperialism. That is what we need to fight for. We need to push anti-imperialist politics in our time. And it is urgent that we do that. And we do not abandon anti-imperialism to play the red team versus the blue team game, right? And that is what is urgent in our time. It's not red team versus blue team. It's the working families of this country and the people of the world struggling against imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, a monopolistic system that is making the world poor and keeping the world poor and holding back human development. And we must oppose imperialism. And the woke left, they support imperialism as long as it has a rainbow flag on it. And the right wing, they don't seem to understand that the leaders of our country are not communists and socialists like they are in China. They seem to believe that somehow Biden, Genocide Joe is the same as Hamas and is the same as the Palestinians, is the same as Iran. There's a lot of bad politics and lack of understanding all around. But we should not give up. We need to promote anti-imperialism everywhere we can. That is the urgent necessity of our time. We must promote anti-imperialism everywhere. And I've been telling people, and I just keep saying it, the most important case in this country right now goes to trial on September 3rd. And that is the case of the Uhuru movement. And if you don't agree with me, you disagree with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson realizes that the Uhuru case is the most dangerous case in America right now. They have charged a group of black activists who engage in economic development in St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Petersburg, Florida. They have charged them with being Russian agents. And if they can get away with imprisoning the Uhuru movement, at that point, they can get away with silencing anyone who opposes their wars or anyone who builds up a community of solidarity and resistance. And Tucker Carlson realizes how dangerous it is. And he talked to Joe Rogan about that for about a half hour on the Joe Rogan show because he realizes how dangerous it is. And Chairman O'Malley of the African People's Socialist Party, we interviewed him on this channel just 2 or 3 days ago. We had a great conversation. But he was also, I will add, Chairman O'Malley, he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson is a right-wing conservative from an anti-communist background. And Chairman O'Malley is a lifelong African socialist, African, communist. But the two of them agreed. They agreed when it came to how Black Lives Matter was a controlled movement and how they didn't consider it to be helpful. And there was a beautiful moment in the interview where Chairman O'Malley made Tucker Carlson laugh. It was really beautiful, and I'm going to try to find you the clip. I want the audience here to see that. It was really, really a beautiful moment, and I'm going to put that moment on for you all. It was just a beautiful, beautiful moment from the Tucker Carlson interview with Chairman O'Malley. I'm going to put it on 1 second. I would like you all to see this. This is a right-wing conservative who is against the war drive against Russia, who is against the jailing of the Uhuru movement, interviewing a far-left black revolutionary communist. And the two of them agreed about the nature of Black Lives Matter, and O'Malley actually made Tucker Carlson laugh.
I'm confused. So you're describing basically what the Black Lives Matter people said 4 years ago. Some of them got legit rich out of it. You don't seem like you've gotten rich. And they got all this money from Apple, the biggest companies in the world. And of course, the media cheerled them. How did you miss out on that?
Well, because the thing is, like, to say Black Lives Matter is such an empty slogan. It's a whine rather than a demand. It's empty. I mean, Joe Biden says Black Lives Matter. I mean, you got the whole Democratic Party, Congress and whatever, get out on one knee with kente cloth from Ghana over their shoulder saying Black Lives Matter. Because it doesn't mean anything. It's a non-statement. But what we say is black people have to have power. So we want power over our own life. That's the question. And that's the basis for the difference in how they would treat Black Lives Matter and how they would treat us. And you're right. The Black Lives Matter slogan is almost a Zuckerberg manufactured slogan. Certainly if it's not manufactured by Zuckerberg, it's certainly promoted by Zuckerberg and all the white people who love us.
And he's pointing to the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement, it didn't build up economic power in the black community, which is what the Uhuru movement does. Now, this is a clip from the great film that I made with Peter Coffin about the Uhuru case. Peter Coffin made the film, but, I featured a lot. It was based on an event we did. And the reason that the Uhuru movement is being targeted is because of the fact that they are building up economic power in the black community. They are running farmers markets. They are doing classes for pregnant mothers. Learn about this case. It's important to Tucker Carlson. It should be important to anyone who loves freedom, right? This is the kind of group that's being suppressed. After the rioting was done, U.S. media kind of forgot about those communities. Well, Uhuru, they went out there because they saw black and brown people like themselves that were out there protesting and rioting. And they stayed there, and they've been there since 2014, providing services in the community, giving these young people in the community something constructive to do, not just go out and break shit to raise awareness about the conditions they're in, but ways to actually feed people and serve the community. And they've been there in St. Louis since 2014 doing constructive work. They have really escalated these programs. They have a farmers market. They provide classes and services to pregnant mothers, and in particular in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida. They're trying to undo the damage that the U.S. Department of Justice and the state police and the local police and all the forces have been doing in communities like Ferguson, Missouri. And at the same time that they've done this community work, the African People's Socialist Party has also taken a firm anti-imperialist stance. They support China. They support Russia. They support Cuba. They support Iran. And when the United States started piling weapons into Kiev, they defended Russia's right to intervene.
This defensive war in Ukraine that Russia is actually waging against world colonial powers, not Ukraine as a single entity, but the U.S. and all colonial powers who have an interest in colonially dominating African people right here in this country and around the world and extracting resources from the majority of peoples on the planet. That system, this current system, is in severe crisis, and they cannot rule in the same old way.
Because of that, their homes were raided. Then months later, the federal government came out with an indictment, and it's charging them with being Russian agents. And it's trying to allege that the election campaign that they ran in St. Petersburg, Florida, was somehow interference in the U.S. electoral process.
4 activists associated with the People's Democratic Uhuru movement and the African People's Socialist Party have been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. The indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice accuses them of spreading Russian propaganda and cites simply some web conferences that they had, some Zoom meetings, some emails they sent out, as well as the fact that they have run routine election campaigns. Is this of concern to the Secretary General as an attack on human rights, freedom of assembly, etc.?
I frankly was not aware of the case before you mentioned it. Let me look into it and I will get back to you.
What's going on in Africa is directly connected to what's going on here. What's going on in Ukraine is connected to what's going on in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? It's an international global economy that's all connected.
Because they go to conferences in Russia, this constitutes Russian meddling in the elections. The whole thing is ridiculous. It's completely, utterly ridiculous. They've been running these campaigns for years, since before I was born. Back in the 1970s, they were running people for office. Their platform of reparations, I mean, Marianne Williamson, she's a major Democrat candidate. She also says she believes in reparations. I mean, it's not a unique message that they have in that sense, but they have been targeted because they're doing what you're supposed to do. I mean, you know, at all of our meetings, we have a picture of Fred Hampton up on the stage because Fred Hampton, he built a free breakfast program. He organized what he called a rainbow coalition, uniting low-income people, white, black, brown, Arab, Latino, into one organization, you know, trying to build up community empowerment, trying to do community service projects while teaching Marxism and socialism. You know, we look at Fred Hampton as a great example of the American revolutionary tradition. And, you know, the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, you know, they don't like that we wave the American flag. They don't like that we consider ourselves patriotic. They have their own kind of unique analysis. They talk about what they call the colonial mode of production. That's not traditional Marxist thinking. And we don't agree with them on a number of issues. But it doesn't matter. We support them.
We all have to stand up and oppose the ideology of division and support an ideology of unity based upon our material interests, you know what I'm saying, to work together.
People who can't understand that, people who can't get past, you know, this or that, like, we got to put aside our differences and say that if they come for them, they come for all of us. If they go after them, they got to deal with all of us. That needs to be the attitude among anti-imperialists. You know, and I mean, I feel like the Uhuru case should be on the front page of every newspaper. It is the most important case right now because if they can throw them in prison, they have basically declared anti-imperialist activism to be illegal. So if you're a conservative, a liberal, a libertarian, whatever, you know, we need to raise awareness about this case. Now, I'm trying to figure out if I can put together some kind of outreach material for the Libertarian Party convention happening on May 25th. It looks like I'm going to be there. It's in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump is going to be speaking at that convention. It looks like I'm going to be part of the press pool at that convention. It looks like I'm going to be credentialed to go to it. And I am trying to figure out some kind of outreach material that will include, you know, a message about the Uhuru case to the libertarians. I'm trying to put that together. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a donor that can give us some funding, and I'm trying to figure out where I can get it printed and, you know, get a glossy magazine or a pamphlet or something put together so that we can raise awareness about the Uhuru case, because it is the most important case. And And I mean, I see what they're doing to the Palestine protesters. I see what they've done to the January 6th protesters. I see what they're doing to Uhuru right now. And they are coming for all of us. They do not want dissent. They want to transition this country into a low-wage police state to save their system. And we've got to say no, right? We will not be made to pay for a crisis that their system created. We need jobs and schools and healthcare and education. Not more war, not more political repression, not more bombs and tanks and weapons for Israel. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need economic growth and development. We need an economy organized to meet the needs of the people, not the profits of a wealthy few. We need the banks and the factories and the industries and the centers of economic power to be in the hands of the people so that we can grow and expand, right? We need to do what the Chinese have done and the Russians have done and the Cubans have done and the Iranians have done and the Nicaraguans have done and the Venezuelans have done and the Syrians have done and the Vietnamese have done and the Zimbabweans have done. We need to take control of our economy, right? We need to have an economy that serves the people of this country, not the profits of the imperialists, of the huge multinational corporations that dominate the United States and the world. They have no loyalty to this country or any other country. The only God they worship is money, and they are looking to preserve their position as rulers of the world by driving down living standards, beating down countries, and setting up a prison state here at home. And we've got to reject that. We have got to reject their sinister plans for degrowth and a police state, for austerity and impoverishment, and World War III. That is what we must do. And we must build an anti-monopoly coalition fighting for jobs and schools and healthcare and freedom and an end to these wars. And we need to build an anti-monopoly coalition against the ultra monopolies, the big banks that dominate the U.S. economy and keep the world poor and are making the rest of the world poorer and are destroying American jobs and living standards so that they can make themselves rich. We don't want your low-wage police state. We don't want it. We don't want your surveillance state. We don't want your World War III. We don't want your bombs and weapons for Israel while America gets poorer. We don't want your confrontation with Russia and your practicing for World War III on Russia's border with NATO troops, war games. We don't want it. We don't want your provocations on the Korean Peninsula. We don't want pouring weapons and provocations on Taiwan, trying to divide China. We don't want it. We don't want it. We see what you're trying to sell us. And I'm talking to you, Mike Johnson, and I'm talking to you, Joe Biden, and I'm talking to you, Kamala Harris. We don't want what you are selling. We don't want it. We know what you're all about. We've been living under your rule since the 2008 financial crisis, and we've gotten more of our rights taken away. We've gotten poorer as a country. We've gotten squeezed by inflation. We've gotten more war around the world, more Americans coming home in dead bodies, coming home in body bags, more of our freedoms taken away, more people dragged away in the middle of the night for speaking up and saying what they believe, more SWAT teams kicking down doors, more drones flying into people's homes. We don't want it. We've gotten more lead in our children's water. We've gotten more roads falling apart. We've gotten more bridges crumbling. We've gotten more power plants falling apart, power grids collapsing in Texas, power plants exploding during the hurricane here in New York City. We've gotten so many examples. We've gotten train derailments. We have gotten poison gas. We have gotten pollution. You don't have anything for us. You don't have anything for us. Right? What you are selling, whether you call it left or right, whether you call it woke or anti-woke, what you're selling, your low-wage prison planet police state, your World War III, your regime change, your Zionism, we don't want it. We don't want it. The American people do not want it, and they don't know what to call it, and they don't know why you're doing it, but they know they don't want it. They know that our country is moving in one direction, and they desperately need it to move in another direction. That is the universal sentiment in this country. You go to Appalachia, you go to Detroit, you go to the Bronx, you go to Texas, you go to Arizona, you go to Skid Row in Los Angeles, you go to Chicago, you go to Indiana, you go to Missouri, you go to Wisconsin, you go to Oregon, you go to Washington State. Everywhere, Americans don't want what you're selling. We see what you're trying to do to our country. We see what you're trying to do to the next generation of kids, messing with their minds, controlling them with social media. It ain't coming from TikTok. It's coming from Facebook. It's coming from Instagram. It's coming from YouTube. It's coming from the giant social media bots trying to control their minds, trying to destroy our kids' self-esteem. We know what you're offering, and we don't want it. We don't want it. We don't want to be degrown. We don't want to be suppressed. We don't want to be shoved into your pods. We don't want it. We don't want to be canceled. We don't want it. We want economic opportunity. We want growth. We want optimism. We want hope for the future. We want love. We want community. That's what we want. And you can call it whatever you want. And you can put whatever label on it you want. But it's pretty clear that this system is moving things in one way. And the overwhelming majority of the American people desperately need things to go in another way. That is obvious. That is reality. And it is time that we gave voice to it. And that's what we're trying to do with the Center for Political Innovation. Right? We published books. We published Who Are the Houthis and What Are They Fighting For? A book explaining why, if you're a working class American, you ought to support the Houthis. Right? We just published a new textbook, A History of Anti-imperialist Movements in America, Out of the Movement to the Masses. Right? We just had a great gathering in Vermont, and on July 7th, we're having a rally in Washington, D.C. We're trying to spread the message. We're trying to build a community of people who can rely on each other and who can work together to build communities of solidarity and communities of resistance and care for each other as this system crumbles. And it is not easy what we're doing, but we got to do it. We don't have any choice. And they have thrown so much at us, and they have tried to wreck us and tried to incite us against each other, but we just keep going because we know this is what people need. We have answers. We have an understanding of history and the objective laws of history and what drives people forward. We have a spiritual energy. We have something very, very special. And we're trying our hardest to get something done in these very, very hard times. And that's what the Center for Political Innovation is all about. CPIUSA.org. That's what our organization is all about. I'll just put on a quick short clip showing some of our activities that we've done over the past year. And then from there, we'll start doing the roll call, and I'll start answering your questions. So yeah, we'll do that. We're not backing down. We are not backing down. We are going to keep marching ahead, and that's our organization. I see some more super chats have come in. Second half of the show is me answering people's super chats. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell on. Why don't we do the roll call? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. I will start calling you out as I see you. Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Welcome. Down with the feds and the dronies. There you go. Names and locations. Bendigo, Australia, David Fox. And David Fox, if anyone is watching in Australia, David Fox is starting a study group of this book. So send me an email. I'll connect you to David Fox. He and Helen are starting a study group of the new CPI textbook. So get in touch with me. I'll connect you if you're an Australian viewer. All right. Jenny in Cincinnati, Boris in Illinois, Jeff in Los Angeles, Mohsen in Iran, Patrick in Maine, Barry in Utah, London calling, Bob in Troy, New York, Mariah in North Carolina, Mark is with us, San Joaquin Valley, California, a name, Ryan in Kansas City, Amin in Canada, very, very good. Joe in New Jersey is with us. Welcome, Joe in New Jersey. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Alexander from Waterloo, Iowa. John McCarthy in Chicago, Denver, Colorado, Gabby in Chicago, Ottawa in progress, Mississippi. We got Cleveland, Dustin Schlesinger, Sanford in North Carolina, Nick in Michigan, Alex in Brazil, Ralph in Glasgow, the United Kingdom. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Bad Wolf is in Florida. Welcome, Bad Wolf. Bad. All right. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anyone else? I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us? Fakio in Montreal. Justin in Houston. You look built, Justin. Is that you? You look like you work out a lot. Names and locations. Native America, the dude. Very good. Jeff in Delaware. Kieran in London. Welcome, Kieran. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Freedom. Anybody else? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. I missed a few, so if I missed you, say it again. Jean in Singapore. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Bremerton in Washington. Welcome, Bremerton. All right. Anybody else? Names and locations. Manuel in Paris. AL from London, UK. Al from London, UK. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Four Oaks, North Carolina. Donnie Wallace. Welcome, Donnie. You're a Scotsman. William Wallace. Freedom! Right? Or maybe Henry Wallace. Right? The Century for the Common Man. Right? A little bit different than William Wallace. And actual William Wallace probably didn't sound like that. That's just a Mel Gibson movie. Soraya and her mom in the Bronx. Welcome, Soraya and her mom in the Bronx. Welcome. Chris from West Virginia. Salam from Reims, France. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Salam in Reims, France. Good to have you all with us. Anti-imperialism is a message that people all over the world are rallying behind. People look at what Russia and China have become by breaking out of the Western imperialist system. People see the achievements of Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and Vietnam's economic miracle, and they like it, right? This is a global movement of people. We got Chris from West Virginia. We got Manuel from Paris, right? The spread is beautiful. Love it. Don't mean to throw off names and locations. I don't know what the spread is. Are you talking about my bookshelf? Or there we go. Chris in Salt Lake City. Chris is always watching. Chris is awesome out there in Salt Lake City, Utah. All right. Very, very good. Very, very good. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Anybody else? I'm thinking what I want to do, right? Because now I was right. At the beginning of this stream, I started drinking unnamed diet beverage, and I've suddenly gotten my strength back, right? It actually worked. As it got darker, and as I drank the unnamed diet beverage, I suddenly, I've got more strength. And I started pretty early. We started at 8, and we were an hour and a half in. This might be a long stream tonight, folks. So give me something to talk about. Isaac! Isaac is watching. Isaac is a CPI member. He's awesome. Glad you're watching, Isaac. Got to meet you a couple weeks ago. You're a great, beloved member of our community. Christian in Vancouver is with us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just so many people here. This is so awesome. This is so great. I am so glad to be here with all of you. I was going to play a quiet Irish song. It's actually a Scottish song called The Water is Wide, but I feel like that would kill the mood because I'm pumped right now. I've got energy right now, and The Water is Wide is kind of a quiet, sad love song that we talked about the other night. So I'll play that before I leave, but I'm nowhere near leaving. Why don't we play, why don't we play Loch Lomond, right? This is another song that's similar to, it's interesting. I thought that The Water is Wide, I assumed that it was an Irish song. It's actually a Scottish song. It's a Scottish song, and it's called The Water is Wide. It's kind of sad, but when I looked it up, it's actually a Scottish song. So that reminded me of the song Loch Lomond, which is an old favorite, right? Loch Lomond, which is a Scottish song. You take the high road and I'll take the low road. And it's basically about an Irish or a Scottish freedom fighter who's going to be executed, talking about how he's going to return to his love, but he's going to do it, the low road is the spirit world, right? He's going to do it in the spirit world, and she'll do it on the land, and you take the high road and I'll take the low road, but I'll be in Scotland before you. For me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond, right? It's a classic Scottish song. I'm going to put it on Loch Lomond because it's a favorite of mine, right? It is a longtime favorite of mine. I was hearing this when I was a kid, so we're going to put Loch Lomond on. And that kind of fits the mood a little bit more. It's kind of a sad song, but it's not anywhere near as sad as The Water is Wide. So there we go. Loch Lomond.
By yon bonny banks and by yon bonny braes, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love spent many happy days on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. It was there that we parted in yon shady glen, on the steep sides of Ben Lomond, purple hue the highland hills we view, and the moon is coming out in the gloaming. And you take the higher road and I take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland before ye. My true love will never meet again on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Where wild flowers spring and the wee birdies sing on the steep sides of Ben Lomond, but the broken-hearted can't they second spring again. Though resigned we may be while we're greeting, and you take the high road and I take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland before ye. We're meet again on the bunny banks of Loch Lomond. Where me and my true love will never meet again on the bunny banks of Loch Lomond.
All right. Classic Scottish song there. Loch Lomond, old favorite of mine. So now we're in the second half of our show. And in the second half of our show, I answer people's super chat questions. We've got 6 of them so far, and I don't see any Rumble rants. So just 6 here on YouTube. So I'm thinking what we'll do is I've got a few songs I want to play. We just had a song request in the form of a super chat. So I think what we're going to do is I'll answer a couple, then we'll play a song. I'll answer a couple, then we'll play a song. I'll answer a couple, then we'll play a song. We'll do it that way. And again, I've had enough unnamed diet beverage. This might be a long stream tonight. That's fine with me. Right? Who else would I love to hang out with? You guys. You guys are awesome. So now is the time to send a super chat. If there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, which is starting now, send me a super chat or a Rumble rant. Get me talking. Right now is the time. Now is the time to do that. It's a way to support this channel, to support, me having to, this extra room here in New York City where the rent is too damn high, etc. I need your support. It doesn't go to support CPI. CPI funds are separate. If you join CPI or you donate to CPI, that's separate. I don't have access to those funds. If you support this YouTube channel, you are supporting me. So there we go. If you send me a super chat or you join the Patreon or whatever. So, all right. So at this point, we got 6. So I am going to do a couple of them. And I'll do like the first 2, then I'll put on a song. Then I'll do another few. So keep the super chats rolling in. See, we got another one. Great question. All righty. All right. First one. I'm getting into anarcho-syndicalism or union anarchism. I want to understand it, even though I disagree with the anarchist school. Where should I start? Well, I'll tell you that the person that I think was probably the greatest communist, anti-imperialist activist in American history was William Z. Foster. And the first section of this book is about William Z. Foster. Chapter 1 of our new textbook is all about William Z. Foster. And William Z. Foster was a syndicalist long before he was a communist. He was in the IWW, and then he broke from the IWW and, the Industrial Workers of the World, and he formed his own group called the Syndicalist League of North America. So what is a syndicalist, right? This is important. So generally, Marxism, socialism, views the struggle between the workers and the capitalists as a political struggle, a struggle for control of the government. All right, Marxism teaches that the working class needs to have its own political party, and that political party needs to take control of the government. And then with the government, it can seize control of the means of production, and it can organize the economy in the hands of the working class. Now, generally, within the socialist or revolutionary working class movement, there are 3 schools of thought. The first is what you would call social democracy or reformism. And the idea of social democracy is that capitalism just kind of naturally turns into socialism one step at a time. Right? That there is no revolution. There's no uprising. It's just kind of gradual. One day we'll have free healthcare. One day they'll pass another reform law, and that gradually, one step at a time, the reforms that come bit by bit will all kind of add up, and it won't be capitalism anymore. And it'll happen purely through the democratic process, through people voting, through one law here, one law there. That's called social democracy. And the main articulator of that view was a guy named Edward Bernstein. He called it evolutionary socialism. He said socialism is nothing but the sum of reforms. The movement is everything. The goal is nothing. That's what social democrats largely believe, right? They don't believe in a revolution. They believe socialism comes kind of naturally out of capitalism. That's what social democracy is. Well, genuine revolutionary Marxism, 21st century socialism, Marxism, Leninism, all the revolutionary schools, they say no. They say it is a struggle to take control of the government. They say right now we live under a government that is a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and we are struggling to build a revolutionary movement to seize control of the government and make it instead a dictatorship led by the working class, a dictatorship of the proletariat. Right? Those are the words that Marx used. Obviously, the word dictatorship doesn't sound good to anybody, but it just means the rule, right? We live under the rule of the capitalists. And so it's striving to take control of the state and make it the rule of the workers. And it's not step by step. It's right now we're in one system, and then there's a revolution and we have another system. Anarchism, and in particular syndicalism, is a third school of socialist thought. It's not revolutionary Marxism, and it's not social democracy. It is a school of thought that rejects politics. The defining aspect of syndicalism or anarcho-syndicalism or union anarchism or whatever you want to call it, and there's a lot of different brands of anarchism, but you're specifically asking about anarcho-syndicalism, is that they are not interested in taking control of the government. They have no interest in the government at all. They are only interested in the struggle between the worker and the employer. Right? Syndicalists reject politics. They don't want to gradually vote to change the system, and they don't want to seize control of the government and create socialism with a government. Rather, they are interested in creating labor unions. Right? They want to create labor unions, and those labor unions they create will eventually organize the workers to seize their factories in industrial actions. That is what syndicalism is. It is union militancy that rejects politics. And if you want to read a good book about syndicalism, William Z. Foster, the great American communist, was a very serious, dedicated syndicalist before he became a communist. And he wrote a book that you can read online called Syndicalism, where he explains his beliefs in great detail. And I will just link you the PDF of it. Back when William Z. Foster was a syndicalist, he wrote a book about what syndicalists believe. And here it is, right? Here it is, the whole book. Earl C. Ford and William Z. Foster, in the year of 1912, they wrote a whole pamphlet explaining the syndicalist movement, why they rejected politics entirely. And what's interesting is the syndicalists, they were what's generally called the ultra-left school, right? They're not interested in creating a revolutionary government, and they're not interested in voting at all. They're only interested in direct action on the job. Often syndicalists refused to sign union contracts because they said that would recognize the boss's right to exploit you. Often syndicalists believed very much in the use of violence on the job during strikes. And what's interesting is that in Europe and in the United States a little bit, but not as much, back in these days, you had a labor movement. You had workers on the job organizing labor unions. And the labor unions divided into two. And you had the mainstream of the labor unions, most labor unions, that tended to represent more skilled workers, people who went through an apprenticeship, plumbers and pipe fitters and welders and the quote unquote skilled trades. And their leaders tended to be social democrats because these were high paid workers. And often, in order to become a pipe fitter or a bricklayer or one of these skilled trades, you had to get an apprenticeship. You had to have a bricklayer or a pipe fitter or whatever, certify you that you knew what you were doing. And often they would only give it to people of the same race or the same nationality. They wouldn't give it to, they especially wouldn't give it to women, but they wouldn't give it to foreign-born people. They wouldn't give it to non-white people, non-English speakers, etc. So these trades tended to be very, very, very much for the quote-unquote skilled workers. They got higher pay, and they tended to vote for social democrats who wanted to gradually transform capitalism to be better and better for the working class. They were not interested in a revolution. And that was the bulk of the labor movement, right? In America, it was the AFL, the American Federation of Labor. It was started by a guy who was originally a Marxist, a guy named Samuel Gompers, who just became a labor union, a corrupt labor union boss, the AFL. The syndicalists tended to organize the opposite. Syndicalists tended to organize the poorest and most desperate workers. In America, the big syndicalist group was called the IWW, or the Wobblies. And they would organize low-income people, lumberjacks, people who got hired on construction sites, people who worked in textile factories, meat packers, steel workers. They would organize very, very low-paid workers who often were foreign-born, who often did not speak English, who often were not U.S. citizens, who often were not white. And their vision was to create what they called one big union. And the other thing about syndicalism, which makes it interesting, is that syndicalism, in many ways, it departs from being, a Marxist movement. It becomes kind of a religion. It becomes kind of an apocalyptic religion. One thing that syndicalists believe in is the great general strike, right? And it's this idea that one day all the workers will lay down their tools and go on strike together, and it'll be the overthrow of capitalism. The great general strike, and the great general strike is coming. And it's not really ever explained how the great general strike is coming, but the reason we don't vote, and the reason we're not interested in changing the laws, and the reason, because we just got to focus, we got to wait for the great general strike. The reason we don't sign union contracts, the idea is we have to stick to our principles, and then the great Armageddon will come. Another thing is that, and the syndicalists, and this is very interesting, were Malthusians, right? And this is very interesting. And in William Z. Foster's book, he talks about this. They argued that you should not have children because the more children you have, the more people that are there, the more competition there is among workers for jobs. And so it makes everyone's pay go down. So before the revolution, you should have what they call a birth strike. Workers should refuse to have any children and instead focus on building revolutionary unions, right? And refuse to have any children. And then after the revolution, then we have a big fuck fest and we produce as many children as possible because we need more people to create cooperative wealth. The birth strike was a big part of the syndicalist movement, right? No children before the revolution, and then after the revolution, mass reproduction everywhere. That was a big aspect of syndicalism. Now, George Sorel, who was kind of the thinker who inspired fascism, was a syndicalist. And he pointed to certain aspects of the syndicalist wing of labor politics that sort of started to become conservative. Syndicalists would romanticize ancient Greece and Rome. Syndicalists believed in the spiritual power of violence. Syndicalists did not believe that there was any progress, right? We're just going to hold out and stick true to our principles. No union contracts, nothing until the great general strike happens, right? And then it's kind of the power of myth, right? We're going to be like monks. We're not going to get married. We're not going to have children. We're just going to organize strikes that are going to be very violent. And then one day, the great general strike will happen. Syndicalism was almost like a religion, you could argue, right? It was the very, very radical and violent wing of the labor movement that was what they would call the ultra left, but it was a response to the mainstream of the labor movement, the American Federation of Labor in the United States, or the social democratic labor unions in Europe, becoming more and more reformist, right? So the regular labor unions are becoming more and more reformist. They're not even really talking about socialism at all. They're just talking about day-to-day reforms, and they're not revolutionary at all. So then you have the more radical workers And they formed this very, very fanatical, semi-religious, very violent, apocalyptic group that is saying we'll never sign a union contract. We will never recognize the boss's right to exploit us. We will advocate violence on the job. We won't even have children. And we're going to hold out and stick true to our revolutionary principles until the great general strike comes, right? And that, syndicalism was largely a reaction to the sellout and reformist labor leaders, right? It was the opposite extreme. And the main problem with syndicalism was that syndicalists practiced dual unionism. They would not join the unions that were not syndicalist. They only would join unions that were syndicalist. They would only join the industrial workers of the world. They wouldn't join the American Federation of Labor. And this policy isolated the most revolutionary workers, right? Because the bulk of the workers in any factory or any workplace who are in a union are going to be in the regular union. But the syndicalists form a separate ultra-revolutionary union that only, ultra-revolutionary radical people join, and it isolates the more radical workers. And William Z. Foster, the founder of the greatest American communist, the origin of his political tendency is he believed that syndicalists should join the regular labor unions and formed what he called the militant minority. And the militant minority would do what he called boring from within. They would push for revolutionary politics within the reformist labor union. The Wobblies didn't agree. Most syndicalists didn't agree, but Foster had the understanding that isolating the revolutionary workers in a more radical labor union was a hindrance. Dual unionism, as they called it, was a hindrance to the revolutionary movement. So it's all very interesting. I will say that the bulk of American communists were syndicalists. The IWW, the industrial workers of the world, eventually, the people that were in it, many of them became Communist Party leaders, but they had to change their politics because the Communist Party and the Bolsheviks and the Soviet Union had a very different political belief. But the AFL was so reformist and supported World War I and wouldn't allow non-white people and wouldn't allow women and foreign-born workers and such. Because of that, the people that were more radical tended to be syndicalists. And then when the Russian Revolution came, they became communists. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a movie called Reds, but the movie Reds, it features what's supposed to be like a meeting of the Wobblies, right? John Reed was an American journalist who was sympathetic to the Wobblies, and Big Bill Haywood, a guy named Bill Haywood, great, and keep the super chats rolling in. A guy named Bill Haywood was one of the main, union organizers of the Wobblies. He organized the miners, in Colorado and other places. And this is like a depiction of Bill. What's supposed to be Bill Haywood, having an underground meeting of the Wobblies, preaching to workers, trying to get them to join the Wobblies. So this is a scene from the movie Reds. I'll show it and then I'll show you why it's wrong.
And how many days a week? 7 days. 7 every day? You don't come to work on Sunday. Don't come on Monday. And what do you make an hour?
20 cents. How many times have they slammed the door in your face? Because the labor you do is called unskilled. That's right, Bill. Well, the IWW is not going to turn you down because you're unskilled. Listen to him, George. Or skilled. Or black. Or white. Or yellow.
7 days a week.
And what do you make an hour?
10 cents an hour.
One big union. All workers belong to the big union.
I'm working for a lathe worker named Pasquale Alberti. He had an industrial accident. He got his leg crushed. Do you know him?
Yeah, sure, Harvard. Is that what they want to read about in Greenwich Village now? Industrial accidents?
And for that, we need power. And there's only one way to get power. Organize. All the workers together. One big union. And the war the IWW wants you to get into is class war, not a war in Europe. War against the capitalists. You'll never get anything or anywhere until the whole working class belongs to one big...
All right, gentlemen. You've got 20 seconds to vacate the premises. May I ask on what authority? On my authority. This is an illegal assembly.
Excuse me, officer. These men have the legal right to assemble. That's all they're doing.
We know what the hell they're doing. What the hell are you doing?
Me?
You.
I right.
You right? You wrong.
Now it's interesting because this is from the movie Reds. Came out in 1980. And it's a movie that was it was like the American mind after the political upsurge in the 1960s. And as the new communist movement of the 70s was declining, Hollywood kind of was trying to assess, what do we think of American communists? And as I have often said to people, Warren Beatty pretending, movies reflect and comment on the time period in which they are made, not the time period in which they take place. Right. And for example, listen to the voice of, it's supposed to be Bill Haywood. Right. And if you can hear his voice, right, listen to his voice.
And there's only one way to get power. Organize. All the workers together. One big union. And the war the IWW wants you to...
Who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? Sounds like Richard Wolff. The workers in one big union. That's not how Bill Haywood sounded. Bill Haywood was from Colorado, right? That is a New York City Jewish communist accent, right? That's what that is. And later, that's what communists sounded like, right? And when I first went to New York City in 2006, there were all kinds of elderly people there, trying to sell me a newspaper. And they talked about the workers and the capitalists and the bosses, exploitation, but that's not, or Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders, but that's not how Bill Haywood sounded, right? But that's what in the American mind at a time where you had a lot of communists, that's what an older communist guy would sound like. That's not what Bill Haywood sounded like. Bill Haywood was from out West. He may have been a big fat guy. He was that, but he didn't sound like Richard Wolff. He didn't sound like Bernie Sanders. That's like one inaccuracy there that you can see. But that's, again, a communist guy yelling about labor unions, class war. That's New York City. That's not what Bill Haywood would have sounded like. But yeah, syndicalism is an important thing to understand. And it has a lot to do with communism, right? The communist movement in America, especially, largely descended from the IWW. William Z. Foster was the guy who formed the Syndicalist League of North America. He eventually became the most important American communist. Chapter 1 of this book is all about him, But then on top of that, syndicalism is also important to understand fascism, because George Sorel and Sorelianism was very much the inspiration for Benito Mussolini, and that syndicalism was ultra left in that, that they believed in ideas and practices that weakened their movement. And that Lenin wrote a book called Left-Wing Communism, an Infantile Disorder. And that book actually critiques dual unionism. And it says this idea that you shouldn't work in non-communist labor unions is just silliness, right? Why would you do that? And the idea that you should not vote in elections, again, it's just silliness. Why wouldn't you do that? But fascism, right, drew from, a lot of the syndicalists had this oddly spiritual belief that if we just stick with our principles, it doesn't matter if we recruit anybody, it doesn't matter if we grow as an organization, as long as we never sell out and we just kind of stick to our principles, one day the great apocalypse will come and then we'll win, right? And this is ultra leftist thinking. And then there is also this belief that violence is somehow purifying, right? And all of these ideas, they're coming out of a left-wing labor perspective, but fascism very much drew from these beliefs. And as in the 1920s and 30s, as the ruling class was forming what they called counter gangs, right? Of radical, guys who went around beating up communists and breaking strikes, the black shirts of Italy and eventually the Nazi brown shirts. They drew from the syndicalist wing of things because syndicalism was kind of a break with the Marxist tradition, and it was more of this kind of very masculine, very spiritual, and almost kind of looking backward, worshiping ancient knights and mystics. And a lot of syndicalists were anti-Semitic. A lot of syndicalists, did say things about Jews and stuff, and that a lot of syndicalists really liked ancient Greece and Rome, and that George Sorel was the syndicalist leader. They believed in Malthusianism, birth strike. They said people shouldn't have children. That there was, that both communism and fascism have elements of syndicalism, and this is an important thing to remember. All revolutionary movements draw from and are influenced by movements that existed before them, right? And syndicalism is one of the movements that was around before the Russian Revolution. It was a very big movement until the Russian Revolution. After the Russian Revolution, it deteriorated, and some syndicalists became fascists, and most syndicalists, I think, became communists. And there's still some people that think they're in the IWW, some like anarchists who think they're doing it, but it's not a big thing anymore, right? But it used to be, in Europe and in the United States prior to World War I. It was a very, very big current, and it had a very big influence on communism and fascism, which became big movements later in Europe later on, right? And that every political movement is influenced by other political movements. So I guess that's a long answer to your question, but it's a very important question, right? You asked about union syndicalism. So there we go. All right. The next question I've got here is war games like the ones they do right on the North Korean border, but North Korea are the aggressors for defending themselves. Yes, they do the exact same thing on the North Korean border. They practice going all the way to the border, and then they stop, and then they say North Korea is aggressive when they test a missile and shoot it into the ocean to just show that they could retaliate if it's absolutely ridiculous. IWW is big in Australia too. Absolutely. What they're doing with North Korea, it's, again, they do these provocative war games, and then North Korea shoots a missile into the ocean, and then they say North Korea is being aggressive, and they never explain. There was that stream where I showed you that they North Korea was testing missiles, and they're like, oh my God, it's aggressive. And then they just passingly mentioned that the USA put a nuclear submarine into South Korea, which could have had a nuclear bomb in it. They didn't say. And it's like, oh, looks like North Korea was a little bit provoked, and that's how they do things. So there you go. All right. So we've done 2. So why don't we now, we did have a super chat request from John. John requested that we put on the St. Patrick's Battalion because it's Cinco de Mayo, a day of celebrating Mexican independence. And this is a song by our friend David Rovix that he wrote in honor of the Americans who fought in the Mexican Mexican-American War, right? That there was a number of Irish Americans who were drafted to fight in the Mexican-American War, and they switched sides, and they were called the St. Patrick's Battalion. And this is a great song by David Rovix about the St. Patrick's Battalion. David Rovix is our friend. So we'll put on St. Patrick's Battalion.
My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick's Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. March beneath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin Golbra, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad por la Republica. Just 50 years after Wolf Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, where their volunteers were raping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side, we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
Yeah. Just some quick history while we're on that. The St. Patricios, I believe is what they're called in Mexico, are still considered national heroes of the country because they switched and joined the Mexican side in the Mexican-American War. There's monuments to them all over Mexico. I believe they made a movie about them a few years ago. The other thing that's interesting, so the Mexican-American War, Abraham Lincoln called it the most unjust war ever fought. Ulysses S. Grant, who was the Union Army general during the U.S. Civil War, he wrote his autobiography. He fought in that war, and he also says it was completely unjust. What's interesting is Karl Marx supported it, and Engels actually disagreed with Marx and corrected Marx on it, and Marx changed his mind. Marx thought that Mexico was underdeveloped and that the United States taking over California and Texas from Mexico would lead to, Mexico becoming more capitalist, which eventually could lead to socialism. But Engels said, no, this is a war to expand the slave plantation system, which it was. There was, Henry David Thoreau, he refused to pay his taxes in protest of the Mexican-American War and was put in jail. He wrote his essay on civil disobedience about why he was refusing to pay his taxes, and that that the abolitionist movement in America saw the Mexican-American War as a corrupt war to seize more territory, to set up more slave plantations. And that's what happened. Texas was a slave state, you know, and it was an unjust war. And, you know, Abraham Lincoln opposed it. And even Ulysses S. Grant, a top military guy who was a leader of it, said it was completely unjust. When I read Ulysses S. Grant's autobiography, I was impressed by how anti-war he was, about how the Mexican-American War was totally corrupt. He said it was an awful, awful war. So that's kind of interesting history there, and that Marx was wrong. People make mistakes, right? Marx thought it was a good war because he thought the USA was industrial and Mexico was not. And then, you know, he didn't understand that the issue was slavery. This was the slave plantations, the most reactionary part of the United States, expanding to try and get more territory and get more strength in the American government. And it was designed to, you know, to oppress, and it led to the oppression of the Chicano people, right? The Chicano people are largely colonized, right? I mean, they're, you know, I mean, there's, you know, the people of the old Southwest, they live as second-class citizens in their own country. You know, many Spanish-speaking people, you know, I mean, you know, they weren't allowed to speak their language. They had their language suppressed. You know, people talk to Latin folks who grew up in Texas in the 1950s and 60s, and they'll tell you how, you know, how they were very harshly punished in school if they were caught speaking their own language, you know, and how they were second-class citizens. And, you know, I mean, you can read all that history, right? The Mexican-American War, the seizure of Texas and Southern California and Arizona and New Mexico by the United States in an effort to expand slavery was not a good thing. And a lot of Americans died so that slaveholders could make profits and try to expand slavery across the United States. It was a disaster, and it wasn't good for anybody. So the St. Patrick's Battalion, those Irish guys who'd been drafted and told they had to go fight, you know, they switched sides and joined with the Mexicans, and they were right to do that because the U.S. Was not yet an imperialist country. It was still in the phase of industrial capitalism, but it was a colonial war to expand slavery, and it was wrong. And they were right to resist. They were right to refuse to participate. So there you go. I just wanted to give some context there. And thank you for that song request, John McCarthy. And keep the super chats rolling in, folks, because the night is young. And I mean, I could be on here till midnight. We'll see how long I last. I've still got some unnamed diet beverage. I'm tempted to pour it out because I don't want to be up all night, but what the heck, you know, I got up pretty early this morning, and, you know, I'm having a great time with all of you. We're talking about syndicalism. We're talking about the Mexican-American War. We're talking about all kinds of stuff. All right. And that's all the unnamed diet beverage. It's 10 o'clock at night. I don't need more of it. It's going to be hard to get to sleep tonight, but that's good. I can finish the piece I'm writing for the Libertarian Convention. I need to finish it. I need to do you know, when I'm writing, you know, the easy part of writing is the rhetoric, but you know, the quotations and the statistics and that stuff, it's kind of a chore. You have to assemble it, and you have to, you know, and that's a little bit harder. So I've written the bulk of the pamphlet already, but I need to go write the data and the facts. You know, I need to assemble, you know, the statistics, because you have to get it right. And the quotations, you have to get them right. And I have to do kind of the other work. And then I go over it one more time and I go through it, and I'm trying to finish this piece, you know, explaining our beliefs, talks about Uhuru, talks about China, talks about Julian Assange, talks about many, many different things. All right. Reading and watching Rex recordings, I think, for a former atheist leaning agnostic trying to discover faith, can be specifically Christian. I've been stuck in this I want to believe phase for too long. That's an interesting question, right? You know, there are some arguments that you can make about why God exists. The strongest argument I've ever heard is, did something come out of nothing? And in order to be an atheist, you must believe that something came out of nothing, right? Maybe you don't believe in any spiritual forces, but there is obviously a material world, right? This wooden table below me is here. I'm talking into a computer. I have flesh. there is material. Where did this material come from? Well, did it come from nothing? How did something come out of nothing? You know, if nothing preceded the material world, where did the material world come from? And that's a very, very strong logical argument for the existence of God, right? I mean, if you're there and you say, well, you know, all that exists is the material world, fine. Where did the material world come from? I think that's a very, very strong logical argument for the existence of God, because obviously it had to have come from somewhere. And if you think something can come out of nothing, just magically, I mean, then you have to acknowledge there's some kind of supernatural force, right? There had to be something to bring something into being, which means there's something non-material. You know, and that's a question, right? The end of the day, I do, however, believe that things like religion, these are not things that can be logically explained. Now, there are people, I think my good friend Gavin would vehemently disagree with me, right? But I think that belief in God is something that you just have to experience, right? And that my reconversion is the result of a lot of life experiences. And that part of, this is where it gets all tricky, okay? And again, chapter 5 of this new textbook. I put a lot of hard work into this textbook, and so did Marissa, and so did Elizabeth, so they all deserve credit. But, you have to understand your own desires, your own impulses, what drives you. And it's really important because, we all have different desires. We all have different impulses, okay? And, we all have what's called libido. And libido is our sex drive, our drive to procreate. And it's also our rage, our anger, our excitement with violence, right? And that's natural, right? And and libido also accompanies, the Oedipal impulse, the desire to rebel against your parents, rebel against authority. And all three of those impulses are completely normal and healthy. It is healthy to have a sex drive, right? That's how more people get created. Humans have a sex drive. It is healthy to get angry. It is healthy to be excited by violence. People go watch boxing matches and sports. People watch violent movies because violence is very exciting. And, part of growing up is saying I'm not a child anymore, is wanting to have your own independence, is wanting to, be independent from your parents and say, no, you're not going to tell me. I'm going to define myself as an individual, right? So all of those impulses are very healthy. But there's another impulse that we all have, which is called parental transference, right? Which is that a child, when they are born, one of the, this is one of the strongest arguments against libertarianism, right? Libertarians say we're all individuals. No one owes you anything. Well, if that's the case, you would be dead, because when a child comes out of the womb, it can't do anything for itself, right? It can shit on its own and it can cry on its own. It can't feed itself, right? It can't take care of itself. Babies all rely on other people. And, these libertarians, they say, well, society owes you nothing, right? No one ever owes. Well, actually, they do, right? If a mother has a baby and she doesn't feed it, right, and she doesn't take care of it, she goes to jail for neglect. She owes that baby something because it's breathing, right? And that's like, what's his name? Ben Shapiro. He's like, socialism's this idea that I owe you shit because you're breathing. Well, actually, your parents owe you shit because you're breathing, right? And if they didn't owe you shit because you're breathing, you would be dead, right? A baby, like an infant, is dependent on its caregiver, right? And that's an important reality, right? And that the relationship that one has with their parents is very, very important, because especially when you are a small baby, you are reliant on the parent, right? And so, we go through life looking for people to look up to, looking for people to learn from, looking for people to emulate, looking for people to validate us, right? That's part of life. And part of that is taking that baby needs the parent, right? It needs its mother and father, right? And it's taking those feelings that an infant has, and as you go through life, you transfer them onto other people. And it's just natural, right? And you go through life, you have a teacher or a mentor, you have a big brother or a big sister, you have a friend, you have, people who to some degree or other, you transfer those very, very primitive infantile feelings about relying on a parental figure. You transfer them onto other figures throughout your life. And again, that is also very natural, and that's called parental transference. Now, parental transference is very healthy, right? We all need someone to look up to. We all need somebody that when we do something good, they say to us, "Good job. I'm proud of you." We all need somebody that we can try to please, that we can look to for guidance, that we can look up to. And the greatest parental transference is God. Right? I mean, and that's at the end of the day, what is God? God is a father figure or a mother figure, depending on your religious beliefs. God is a parental figure. And this is why when Carl Jung talks about people who believe in God, he can't prove that God exists, but he can show that people who believe in God live longer. He can show that people who believe in God are healthier. It's because they have a source of parental transference. By their belief in God, they're trying to please God. They are praying to God. They are thinking about a parental figure that they are trying to live their life according to, and it gives them a source of strength, right? And that's necessary because it is important. Just like that baby needs physical parents taking care of it, as you grow up, the feelings that you have for parents, you transfer them onto other figures throughout your life. And one of those figures is God. And so, it strengthens you if you can have parental transference. Now, just like you have parental transference, you also have a libido. You also have Oedipal impulses, right? And this is just part of being a human being. We currently live in an era where they are trying to kill parental transference. Okay? And this is the biggest aspect of the liberal order, because parental transference gives you strength. And a great example of that is the Khrushchev secret speech. The Khrushchev secret speech devastated the Soviet Union because Stalin was the father of the country, right? And Stalin never went around saying, "I'm the father of the country." He just was, right? He was the man at the top. He was the symbol of the Soviet Union. He was the leader of the country. And he was, the one that everyone was trying to please. The main thing that Stalin went around doing was rewarding people for working really hard. Stalin went around the Soviet Union and, they had Stakhanovism, where people worked really, really hard. If you mined the most coal, or you farmed the most wheat, or, whatever, you got an award for it. And Stalin was the guy who went around the country rewarding people. And Stalin was the man at the top, the figure who was the leader of socialism in the Soviet Union. And he was the voice on the radio that guided them through the Second World War. He was the father of the country, or whatever. So when Stalin died, and a couple of years later, when Khrushchev came to power, when Khrushchev took a dump all over Stalin, that devastated the Soviet people because it had a psychological impact. Okay? If if people have gone through that level of hardship, of building the country up from nothing, defeating Nazi invaders, industrializing, all the hardships, we have no idea, those of us who live in the West, right? The Bolshevik Revolution and all of that, what they went through. And the whole time that they were overcoming these huge hurdles, 27 million people in the Soviet Union died in World War II. They're overcoming all these huge hurdles. And the man who is the guy that they're all looking up to for guidance, that man is Stalin. And he's the symbol of all of that, right? Stalin was about more than one man. Did Stalin do bad things? I'm sure he did. right? Did Stalin make decisions that hurt people? Absolutely. But he took on it a higher quality. And so the Khrushchev secret speech was very much about robbing the Soviet Union of that, getting everyone into a demoralized state where Stalin had been this brutal mass murderer and cult of the individual. And if you read the secret speech, it's about way more than just accusing Stalin of bad things. It's about attacking parental transference. That's what the secret speech is about. It's about saying that we should not have people that we look up to like this, right? When you talk, the phrase cult of personality, cult of individual, it was an attack on the very idea of having a figure like that, okay? And killing parental transference, killing God, killing your parents, killing your heroes is a really big part of what the liberal order is doing to people psychologically in our time. It's a really big part of the mind fuck that the liberal order is trying to do. On the one hand, they are trying to tell you there is no one good, right? There is no God, they say. Stalin was a mass murderer. All the political figures are corrupt. Everyone's just selfish and in it for themselves. Don't meet your heroes. There are no good people. That's the first thing. So there's no one that you can look up to. There's no one that you can gain that kind of validation from. There's no one that you can get that transference, that parental transference that we all long for from. There's nobody like that. And on the other hand, they're trying to amp up our libido and our Oedipal impulses. And again, Oedipal impulses are necessary. Libido is necessary, but so is parental transference and wokeism. And a lot of the psychology of Twitter and Facebook is amping up your rage and your desire for vengeance, your desire to hurt people, your desire to punish people. And it's also amping up your sex drive, pornography everywhere, etc. It's also urging you not to listen to people in your life who would be perceived as an authority, urging you to resent people in your life that would be an authority. And then at the same time, trying to kill any parental transference that you would have. And so I'm looking at this from a Freudian perspective, and I'm seeing how dangerous this is. If you take away people's parental transference and you just amp up, you unleash, you unchain the libido, and you unchain the Oedipal complex, the Oedipal feelings, right? Kill your parents, right? That's really fucking dangerous. And it leads to insanity. It leads to society coming apart. It leads to people having no loyalty of any kind. It leads to people having no hope. You know, they say that, and this is a really common thing, that rage is externalized depression. And depression is internalized rage. So if you are constantly in a state of libidinal rage, what you are is you're angry and you're depressed. And when your energy is high, you're angry. And when your energy is low, you're depressed. And when your energy is high, you're angry. And when your energy is low, you're depressed. That is an awful place to be. That's a horrible place to be, right? But if you amp up libido, right? If you get people into a state of being where all authority is a liar, everyone's trying to oppress you, no one understands what you've been through, rebel, 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 right? If you get people into that state of mind, they will rage when their energy is high, and they will be depressed when their energy is low. And that is where a lot of young people are right now. And there's no parental transference. There's no feeling of like, I'm going to go out and work hard on this project and make someone proud of me and accomplish something. I'm going to do what's right and wrong. You know, if you have no parental transference, right? You have no God in heaven who can want you to do the right thing and sacrifice and do what's right. You have no father or mother figure that you're trying to please, right? If every leader is a phony, every leader is a fraud, and there is no God, right? How can you gain validation from your work? How? How can you gain any validation from your work? There's no one to tell you good job. There's no one to be proud of you. There's no one to tell you that your endurance and your sacrifice is worth it. Nobody, right? So what's the point of working hard? What's the point of achieving anything, right? And that is a really, really dangerous state of mind. So we're amping up the libidinal stuff, and we're robbing people of parental transference, right? There's no heroes, there's no great leaders, there's no God, there's no and it's psychologically destroying people. All right, the social media mindset, what Silicon Valley is doing, and I think I don't know if it's intentional or not. I mean, it could very well not be intentional, right? It could be. It could be as simple as, on the one hand, right, rage and sex are quick sellers. People like to see violence. People like to see sex, right? So you amp and people love getting permission to unleash their rage, right? And that's the French Revolution, and that's, if you have people that have restrained their sex drive their whole life, and you come along and say, let it out, it's okay, they're going to love you, right? If you have people who've restrained their anger their whole life, they've been holding back their anger, and you come along and say, let it out, be mad, they're going to love you, right? And that's a cheap way. And you accompany that with the fact that people like to see movies about sex. People like to see movies about violence, right? So it could just be marketing. It's not a giant conspiracy, I don't think. It's just marketing. And then on top of that, you throw in the fact that parental transference is the basis of people opposing you, right? Right? If I'm a leader of a country, if I'm in opposition, if I don't like Trump, the last thing that I want is people having parental transference and seeing Trump as their great father figure, because that will enable them to rally together behind Trump and move against me. Right. And parental transference in all forms, cult of personality, whatever you want to call it, lays the basis for people coming together and building mass movements of all different kinds, fascist, communist, religious, whatever, right? Parental transference is a big part of it. It always is, right? Any political movement, and it is not always around one individual. But, if you're in a political group, there's going to be other people in the political group who you're going to try to impress, right? That's parental transference, right? If you're in a religious organization, there's going to be a pastor or a bishop or somebody that you're going to try to impress, right? And if you're religious, there's going to be the voice of God. You're going to be trying to please God, right? And that parental transference lays the basis for collective action, right? Parental transference is a big part of collectivism, right? And that's how human beings organize themselves. That's why every classroom has a teacher, right? That's why every workplace has a manager, right? That's why every country has a head of state. They're all kind of taking the role of the parent in that situation. The teacher is the parent of the classroom. They're not really, but they're playing that role, right? The manager is the parent of the workplace. Not really. He can be an asshole, but he's kind of playing that role. The president is supposed to be the father or the mother of the country, right? That's what people want, right? And this is all very psychological. So the more that you kill parental transference, the less people can come together in groups and organize to achieve goals. So if you can understand that, if you can understand why Khrushchev's secret speech was a huge gift to the imperialists, why Deng Xiaoping said, we will never do to Mao what Khrushchev did to Stalin. And that's a quote from Deng Xiaoping. He said, yes, we acknowledge Mao's mistakes. We will never do to Mao what Khrushchev did to Stalin, because he saw how badly that devastated the Soviet Union, right? If you can understand all of this, you can understand the psychology of why believing in God is a revolutionary act, right? I mean, I can tell you that I don't think something came out of nothing, and we can have a logical argument about that. But since we're talking about politics, I can tell you that believing in God is a revolutionary act in our time, right? Believing in God is saying, I will have someone to please. I will have a figure. I will admit there is something more powerful than me in the universe, and that I will draw strength from trying to please that person or that entity and live my life according to that person's wishes or that entity's wishes, right? And that believing in God gives you a huge amount of power. because it enables you to have parental transference, right? And it gives you a reason to achieve, and it gives you a reason to work harder, right? And that parental transference is very much something that they would like to destroy. Now, obviously, there's going to be a religious person who's going to hear this, and they're going to say, well, Caleb, you're supposed to serve God. God's not supposed to serve you. That's the point, right? It gives you the ability to serve someone else. It gives you the ability to live according to other principles. It gives you, I mean, and that's, maybe I'm not making any sense right now, but what I'm telling you is that there's a huge amount of psychological manipulation in our time. And that right now, you know, we human beings, we have all kinds of impulses, but parental transference is being suppressed like crazy. They don't want us to have any parental transference, and that weakens us. And at the same time, our libidos are being amped up, and that is psychologically devastating. So if you make a decision to believe in God, right, and to think that God exists, and to think I want to live my life not according to what I want, but according to what God would want, right? If I can live for a purpose higher than myself, and I can try to please this powerful force in the universe that's way bigger than me, that gives you a huge amount of strength. And that's what I believe. I'm responding to a super chat, and I'm trying to explain to you from my perspective. Again, this is all a lot of stuff, but I'm responding to a super chat, right? The question was about, you know, former atheist, I want to believe. Valen, you're saying to me you want to believe. And what you're saying is you want parental transference. You want there to be something to believe in. You want to have your life not simply be about pleasing yourself. You want to please someone else. You want there to be something higher than you that you can aspire to. That's what you want. That's what you're saying when you say, I want to believe. And I'm explaining to you what that's about, right? You know, at other points in your life, you may want to rebel. Good for you. We all need to rebel, right? At other points in your life, you may want to release your sexual impulses. We all want to release our sexual impulses. At other points in your life, you may want to rage. That's fine. But we're living in a society where rage, rebellion, all of that is amped up, and we are robbed of parental transference. And so I'm giving you my perspective. And I'm hoping that this is a useful insight. You know, some people in the chat get this and some don't, but I'm doing my best here to try and explain. You asked me, you know, look, I understand there's a lot of people who watch these live streams who don't share my religious views, and that's fine. Right? I'm not here, you know, these live streams, we talk about a lot of different topics. I'm not here to convert you to my religion. I'm just telling you, if you do ask, I will give you an answer. And there you go. All right. Okay. If they cancel God, wow, we're getting really religious tonight, aren't we? But that's okay. If they cancel God by banning the Bible, how free are we to speak truth to power? We must call it out for what they say and do. Tyranny, keep stand together. Well, I mean, let's be clear about this anti-Semitism law. All right. It's a bit of an exaggeration to say they're banning the Bible. Okay. I mean, that's a little bit hyperbolic. They are saying that things that are in the Bible, as well as things that communists believe, things that anti-racists believe, things that most people in the world believe about Israel, they are saying that these things are anti-Semitic, and therefore the U.S. federal government cannot fund or promote anything that practices or promotes those beliefs, right? That's what they're saying, right? So basically, you know, the law is that the federal government cannot fund anything or promote anything that discriminates, okay? And they are now adding, and anti-Semitism is one of the forms of discrimination that, you know, if you have a business, right, you put up a sign that says no Jews in this business, and it's a public business, well, they're going to say, we can't fund you then, right? The U.S. government cannot fund any form of discrimination, and anti-Semitism is listed as one of those forms of discrimination. What they changed is that they expanded the definition of anti-Semitism to include a lot of things that it did not previously include. How that's enforced is an open question, right? I mean, in theory, there's not supposed to be any government funding of religion anyway, right? Because according to the U.S. Constitution, we have the separation of church and state, right? So there's not supposed to be any federal funding of any religion, but there is, right? I mean, U.S. public schools are not supposed to have religion in them. They're not supposed to be promoting religion because we don't have a state religion. I went to a school in Ohio in the 90s, and we had religion all the time. And, we had what we called release time religion, where it was like every Tuesday, the school shut down in the afternoon, and we all went across the street to the Mennonite church, and we got religious indoctrination. Every year at Thanksgiving, we would have a Thanksgiving assembly where they'd have a minister come in. And honestly, I really hated this as a kid because my family was more liberal. We were a religious family, but we were more liberal. And the religion that was constantly being promoted in our public school system, that's not supposed to do that, was always very conservative. Now, I know in most areas, they don't do that. In areas that are much more religiously diverse than the area I grew up in, they don't do that. But, I had teachers that taught us there were two perspectives. There was biblical creationism and Darwinian evolution. That's not legal, right? And that there is a lot of religion in U.S. public schools, but technically that's illegal. The government is not supposed to support religion, but there are a lot of ways that the government does support religion, right? Public schools are government institutions, so they aren't supposed to support religion, but they do in small towns, in more conservative areas, they do. But they're not supposed to. But most private schools get subsidies from the government, right? You got a Catholic school. Technically, it's private, but it's not all paid for by tuition, right? Most private schools get government subsidies. So then this raises the question, right? If they're using it, say you have a Catholic school, and at your Catholic school, you're using a Bible, and that Bible has 3 or 4 verses in it that blame the Jews for killing Jesus. Does the U.S. government have to end the subsidy to that Catholic school? Because therefore they're promoting discrimination, according to the new definition of anti-Semitism. That's what I want to see. That's what I'm curious about. There are a lot of religious institutions that get subsidies from the government to do things, right? There are mental health facilities that are owned by churches. There are hospitals that are owned by churches that get government subsidies. So that raises a lot of questions, right? I don't know how this new law will be enforced, or if the courts will step in and say that parts of it are unconstitutional, right? I don't honestly know what the implications of this are. I mean, I feel like there's probably a lot of people in the Congress that voted for this with the belief that this would be symbolic, right? That they are pro-Israel. They see all these widespread protests against Israel. So they're going to vote and declare a bunch of stuff to be anti-Semitic. And that way, boom. You know what I mean? That way, Israel, we're on your team. But I'm curious what the actual legal implications of this new law will be, or this new definition will be. I'm curious about it because in theory, right, the federal government cannot fund or back anything that engages in discrimination. And now, and the forms of discrimination that exist include anti-Semitism. And now the definition of anti-Semitism is bonkers, is insane. If you say that Israel was formed as a racist white settler colonial state, that's anti-Semitism. So, all objection to the existence of Israel is considered anti-Semitism. All claims that Jews or the Jews killed Jesus, right? Which, regardless of whether that's historically accurate enough or not, right? I mean, technically it was the Roman Empire that executed Jesus, but regardless, there are a number of Bible verses that say that, that make statements to that effect. That is now considered anti-Semitism. So there's I'm curious how this law will be enforced, and I'm also curious how much of it will be upheld by the courts. Right? Because I feel like cutting off the funding for every Catholic or Protestant private school in the United States, unless they agree to take all Bibles out or cross out 4 or 5 Bible verses with black magic marker. That's not going to happen, right? That's just not going to happen. I don't see that happening, right? I don't, so that I'm curious what the actual implications of this new law will be. I'm curious, right? Again, if this law is purely symbolic, I feel like there's nothing to worry about. And I feel like if they start enforcing it in this way, that will hurt Israel, because a big section of Israel's supporters are evangelical Christians. And one thing that evangelical Christians believe is the Bible is the word of God. The Bible is 100% literally true. That is what evangelicals believe, right? I used to have a bumper sticker when I was a kid that I used to see everywhere. It used to drive me crazy. I'll put it on the screen if I can find it. Yeah, this is the bumper sticker I used to see when I was a kid, and I used to be like, are you kidding me? Right? I would see this bumper sticker, right? And I would think, like, how can anyone think this way? Right? And this is part of why I became an atheist when I was younger, because I would see bumper stickers like this, right? God said it. I believe it. That settles it. Right? And I would see these bumper stickers and I'd be like, you got to be kidding me. Right? And, there were a lot of people that were just like, nope, I just believe what the Bible says. And, I found that to be particularly ridiculous. Well, if you start telling people, which, most evangelical Christians, you start telling people with that poster or that bumper sticker that, no, now you got to cross out certain verses, they're not going to buy that. So, I feel like there won't be a push to enforce it, at least against Christians, because that will hurt Israel, because those are some of Israel's most important allies. So, but we'll just have to see. But I believe it is a ridiculous law. The idea that saying the formation of a white settler colonial state called Israel is racist is somehow not okay. Bullshit. There's so many things. We went over it on a previous screen. It is a bullshit piece of legislation, right? And every congressman and congresswoman that voted for it should be ashamed of themselves, honestly, right? It's bad enough that they're giving Israel a blank check to murder Palestinians, but now they're going to ridiculous lengths to condemn and try to criminalize people that oppose it. They should be ashamed of themselves. They really should be. It's a disastrous piece of legislation. I'm against it. All right. Next, large food and drug industries need to be under public ownership in order to make people well again. I agree with you, right? The drive to make profit from food is not good, right? And there's a lot. They talk about, every time I go overseas, I lose weight, right? When I went to Russia, I lost a huge amount of weight. Because the food that they have in Russia is not pumped full of preservatives and fat and all the chemicals like American food is. And, anybody who spends a long time in Africa or Asia or Latin America or outside of the United States, and in particular outside of the West, outside of the Western countries, you lose weight very quickly. You're in much better shape. Why? Well, it's because the food we eat here is so goddamn processed and so bad for you. Right. And yeah, in order to maximize profits, the food processing centers and all that do all kinds of stuff. And, the FDA, we have the Food and Drug Administration, which is supposed to regulate these things, but we know that they're very cozy with the industry. There's a lot of questions about some of these drugs that they've legalized and their long-term effects on people who take them. And the same goes for the food industry, GMOs, right? Monsanto, that whole thing. So yes, I think the idea of having a publicly owned, food industry, that would be one way of curing that, putting it under public ownership. That said, though, I do believe that, there are some family farms that exist still. And I don't think they should be nationalized. I think the giant farms should be nationalized. I think huge agribusiness farms should be public property. But I don't think we should crush small farmers. There's not many of them left, but I think that small farmers should exist, right? And that they should be subsidized, right? And part of the farming boom they're having in Russia now is helping people open family farms. They're subsidizing family farms. And the idea that we would help a lot of Americans start their own farm, I think that's a good thing too. So I'm not for complete collectivization of American agriculture. I think that I think the giant agribusiness facilities should be under public ownership, but I think we should also subsidize and enable Americans who want to be farmers to become farmers. And maybe there's more organic food. And maybe we subsidize organic food, or maybe we subsidize food that's more healthy or something like that. Again, these are kind of after the revolution conversations, but at the same time, I do agree with you. The problem of the food industry being operated for profit has led to a lot of problems. And, you can see that when you go out of the West, the food is so much better and you lose weight very quickly. The food that we eat here in the United States is not good for us. That is true. That is absolutely true. All right. So I've answered a couple more super chats. So now I am going to put on another song. This one's called "Ye Jacobites by Name," and it's a poem by I think what's his name, Robert Burns was a famous Scottish poet. And he was urging the Jacobites to stop their uprising, to bring peace between England and Scotland. So this is "Ye Jacobites by Name." We're on a kick of Scottish songs tonight.
Jacobites by name, lend an ear, ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear, ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim, your doctrines I must blame, you shall hear, your doctrines I must blame, you shall hear. What is right and what is wrong, by the law, what is right and what is wrong, by the law. What is right and what is wrong, by short sword or by long, we come or strong, for to draw, we come or strong, for to draw. What makes heroic strife, famed afar, what makes heroic strife, famed bloody war. Born to parents' life with bloody war. Then let your schemes alone. In the States, let your schemes alone. In the States, then let your schemes alone. Adore the rising sun and leave a man alone to his fate, to his fate. Leave a man alone to his fate.
That's interesting. I've always heard that song as a little bit of a faster song, but that was very soothing the way they played it. So there you go. The next super chat is "It's always a good day." I already played that, but thank you, John. Now I do see there's a Rumble rant, and it's from Suralam, and he asks, "What is the role of the Australian communists in the global struggle? Are any groups worth joining?" Well, I'm not on the ground in Australia. I do know that David Fox and Helen Woolley, they're two members of our community here on this YouTube channel that live in Australia. And they've done great organizing over the years. They're both labor unionists and great anti-imperialists, and they have recommended they're going to start a reading group around our new textbook, our CPI textbook. So if you would like to get involved with that, send me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com. I'll connect you to them. I do know that in Australia, you have like the Communist Party of Australia, and then you have the like, I think it's called it's like the Australian Communist Party, and then you have Communist Party Australia, and then I know there's the Communist Party of Australia Marxist Leninist, which is like one of the old Mao groups, and there's a bunch of Trotskyite groups, and from what it looks to me, they're kind of a similar situation that we have here in the United States, where you kind of have to do your own thing. You have to kind of break with the standard left, because a lot of those groups are either woke or they're not anti-imperialist or whatever. But I'm not on the ground, so I can't say for sure. But that has been my experience. That has been my understanding. David Fox is a great anti-imperialist. Helen Woolley is a great anti-imperialist. They're also great labor unionists. So I will connect you to them, and they're starting a reading group around our new anti-imperialist textbook for CPI. So that's what I am pointing Australian folks toward at the moment. So there we go. All righty. Ralph Miller says, "Can you be a Christian and be a true Marxist-Leninist?" What makes you a true Marxist-Leninist? Right? I mean, I'm just like, what does that mean? Right? I mean, Marx was an atheist. He was, and the Marxist philosophy of dialectical materialism says that all that exists is matter, and that matter is constantly in a state of motion. Now, if you are a Christian, you believe that there is some kind of spiritual force, God, that is not material. So you are not a materialist in that sense. So I guess if you want to be like really strict about it, you would say technically no. I will say there's a quote from Karl Marx that somebody left in the comments a couple days ago, and I want to show the entire quote. We're often told that Karl Marx said religion was the opium of the people. They're not giving you the whole quotation. This is what Marx actually said. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. It is the heart of a heartless world and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. And the context of that quote is actually Marx praising religion, because religion is something that gives consolation to those who are oppressed. And Marx was quite anti-religious, but this quote that is always used against Marx, the context of it is actually one of the places where he's speaking quite highly of religion, and seeing it as something that enables people that suffer great oppression to get through their oppression. But yes, I mean, if you want to talk about being a true Marxist-Leninist, I mean, I admit that I have broken with dialectical materialism. I believe spiritual forces do exist, and that's not pure dialectical Marxist materialist philosophy, right? I also, I'm at the point where I think Marxism-Leninism is very much the foundation of what I believe, right? I very much believe in Lenin's understanding of imperialism, Marx's understanding of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the historical materialist understanding of how history advances from hunter-gatherer civilization to slavery to feudalism to capitalism, eventually socialism and communism, the working class, the proletariat. I mean, ML is the biggest influence on my beliefs that there is. Okay. But that said, I'm not a pure materialist. And I also think that in the world today, a lot of socialism is not Marxist-Leninist. I mean, the Sandinistas in Nicaragua are not Marxist-Leninists. There are Sandinista party members that are Marxist-Leninists, but the actual Sandinista party is a Christian party, right? They believe in, their slogan is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. Bolivarian socialism in Venezuela is not pure materialist. I mean, it's Bolivarianism, which has elements of Marxism, but also elements of indigenous practices, also elements of Marxism and elements of Christianity, and that, Ba'athist Arab socialism, like in Syria, right? Like what existed in Iraq before the fall of Saddam Hussein. That was socialism, but it was not Marxist socialism. It was Arab nationalist socialism, Ba'athist Arab socialism. And I do believe that socialism exists in many places in the world, and it is not led by people who are explicitly Marxist-Leninist. However, and I'll say this, all anti-colonial movements are heavily stamped by Marxism-Leninism. And if you want proof of that, go to the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran is very anti-communist. Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, said that communism was an abomination, it was atheistic, etc. He also condemned attempts to mix Islam with communism. Doesn't matter. You go to Iran and you read Khomeini and what he said about American imperialism, and you see Lenin's handprints all over it. You listen to Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, and what he says about capitalism and imperialism and the Iranian resistance economy. You see a Marxist influence all over it, right? And Iran, they're building statues of the IRA, and the IRA very much embraced Marxism. The Iranians, they are very close to Venezuela, they're very close to Cuba, they're very close to China. Every anti-colonial movement that has been successful, whether it claims Marxism-Leninism as an influence or not, it has a huge stamp. Marxism-Leninism is the biggest influence on global anti-imperialist and global anti-colonial movements that has ever existed. So if you are an anti-imperialist and you are, aligned with Russia and China and Cuba and Venezuela and Iran against Western imperialism, you're gonna have to understand Marxism-Leninism, especially Lenin's understanding of imperialism, especially the difference between capitalism and socialism. That's going to be a huge influence on how you see things. I think Marxism-Leninism is something that you must understand, despite recognizing that it doesn't have the answer to everything, right? That, again, I think spiritual forces exist. I think that, I do think a market sector is necessary, but then in China, they claim Marxism-Leninism, but they also believe that. I mean, there are ways that I stray from standard Marxist-Leninist teaching, but Marxism-Leninism is the biggest influence on me ideologically, by far, right? By far. And if you are at all anti-imperialist, you need to read Lenin, right? Lenin more than Marx, actually, right? And if you want to know anything, I mean, the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 gave birth to the global anti-colonial and anti-imperialist movement, created modern socialist societies. And I will say also that there's a lot of people walking around who invoke Marxism, Leninism that are not anti-imperialist, that are on the side of the imperialists. And I don't know how that works, honestly, but I would rather align with a Muslim who's anti-imperialist than a Marxist-Leninist who somehow interprets Marxism, Leninism to be on the side of U.S. imperialism, right? If you're neutral in Ukraine, or if you're siding with NATO in Ukraine, you can call yourself a Marxist-Leninist. You can call yourself a lampshade. You can call yourself a necktie, but you're on the wrong side, right? If you think Julian Assange is a big racist and sexist and deserves to be locked up, you can call yourself an anarchist or a Marxist-Leninist or whatever you want. You can call yourself a lampshade. You can call yourself a necktie. You can call yourself a shoelace, but you're on the wrong side. I am more concerned about what side people are on than what ideology they proclaim. Because there's a lot of people who read these very same books that I have behind me and come to wildly different conclusions than I do, and are on the opposite side of the barricade. They are siding with the NATO Nazis in Ukraine. They're siding with Israel and the Zionists. They're siding with the Taiwan separatists, and they're trying to overthrow Iran. They're against Venezuela. They're against Cuba, and it's like, I study Marxism, Leninism, but I am loyal to what Marxism, Leninism created, which is a global anti-imperialist movement that is striving for a world beyond imperialism, beyond the rule of the world by big banks and corporations, beyond degrowth, beyond this system where the whole world is kept poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. I am on the side of oppressed countries. And there's a lot of people who read those books and somehow come to the conclusion that they're on the side of the other countries. And it's like, am I more concerned about what books you read or what side you're on? I'm concerned about what side you're on, right? And if you read the same books as me and you interpret them and somehow you're on the same side as CNN, we don't agree. And I don't care if you, and that's one thing I really want people to get over. We should have no loyalty to anybody just because they invoke Karl Marx or they invoke Lenin, right? And on top of that, we should have no hatred of some force around the world because they denounce Karl Marx or they denounce Lenin, right? I mean, Brian Becker, the leader of the PSL, is just a clown because he went on this whole tirade against Putin because Putin spoke against Lenin in his speech about, announcing the special military operation in Ukraine. Who cares? Who cares? If Lenin was alive today, he would support Putin in Ukraine because he would say Western imperialism is the main danger. What's the first thing that Lenin did when he took power? Was he launched the Congress of the Peoples of the East, and he mobilized Muslims around the world to fight Western imperialism. He said, we don't agree with you politically, but you're fighting the imperialists, so we're on your side, right? And, Lenin was all about anti-imperialism and opposing imperialism and aligning with anybody, even the Emir of Afghanistan, as long as they're fighting the imperialists. And I am utterly blown away because I continue to meet people who somehow think one can be a Marxist-Leninist and not be anti-imperialist, or people that are anti-imperialist and are Marxist-Leninist and somehow have a loyalty to people because they read these books, even though they're on the wrong side. And they get offended when people around the world, like the Iranians or like Putin, speak against Marxism, Leninism. They get offended and they're more, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I just don't get it because it's like, which side are you on? That's what matters. Not, at the time that the Bolshevik Revolution happened, Lenin called the Marxist movement of the world, he called it a stinking corpse. Right? And he denounced the Second International and all the major Marxist parties in the world because they were supporting imperialism and they were supporting World War I. And Lenin said, we're against the war. We're going it alone. We're cutting ourselves off, right? Because we're against imperialism. Marxism, Leninism, what defined it as an ideology was that it was anti-imperialist and that you always side with the forces around the world that are anti-imperialist and that we want to bring down imperialism and that socialism and all of that will come about as the defeat of imperialism. That is what Marxism, Leninism is all about. And if you interpret Marxism, Leninism to mean something other than that, why should I align with you? Why should I care what you think? And if you are not a Marxist-Leninist, but you're fighting the imperialists, like the Palestinians, like the Russians, like the North Koreans, like the Iranians, great, I'm on your side, right? Being a Marxist-Leninist is about being an anti-imperialist. And if someone, is on the side of the imperialists and calls themselves a Marxist-Leninist, I have no loyalty to them, right? Which side are you on? If you're for Assange, you're on my team. If you're for the Uhuru movement, you're on my team. If you're for the Palestinians, you're on my team. If you're for Iran and Venezuela and Cuba, you're on my team, right? If you're against the FBI, you're on my team, right? If you're against NATO, you're on my team. What you call yourself is probably the least of my concerns at this point. We're marching toward World War III. We're marching toward a police state in this country, and I want to stop World War III, and I want to stop the police state, and I want to stop the economic devastation of working families. And my question when I meet you politically is, can we work together to stop World War III? Can we work together to stop the police state? Can we work together to stop the economic devastation of American working families? And if the answer to those questions is yes, I mean, like, the last thing on my mind is, oh, do you call yourself a Marxist-Leninist? Do you have the same pictures on your wall as I do? I don't care about that, because there's a lot of jackasses who call themselves communists and don't want to stop World War III, don't want to stop the police state, and don't want economic justice for working families. So, and there's a lot of people that don't agree with me and are, think communism's bad or whatever, but they want to stop World War III. They want to stop the police state. They want economic justice for working families. So, that's how we need to view things, right? We should not be partisan to the label of communism, because right now the majority of people in America who call themselves communists are woke. They're Trotskyites. They're pro-imperialist. They're crazy, and we're not that. And neither is China, and neither is Russia, neither is Vietnam, neither is any Marxist-Leninist country in the world. So there you go. Every communist government in the world, every single one, supports Russia and Ukraine right now. Every single one. I was just at the Global World Youth Festival, and I sat next to, in that meeting where I talked to Putin, sitting right next to me was the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union. A few seats down from me was the All China Youth Federation. I was in a room full of communists, and they all support Russia. But in America, you get all the communists together, right? You get all the communist people who call themselves communists in America together. You probably can't find 3 people who support Russia. So why should I care if these people call themselves communists? I've made my point, but I just can't say this enough, right? Which side are you on? Not what label do you wear? All right. Caleb, I've noticed rot in the system since the pandemic. Your streams have transformed me from a cynical critic to adopting a Marxist outlook. Well, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm honored. I'm glad. I hope that you will get involved. I hope you'll join the Center for Political Innovation. I hope that you will become involved in our efforts to stop the low-wage police state and build a community of resistance and solidarity where people can support each other and oppose the rotten direction this system is taking things. So there you go. Great. John McCarthy says, David Rovics also has a song about the Wobblies. Okie dokie. Let's put that on, right? All right, just hold on, hold your horses. All right, so we got this. Now it's giving me a pizza ad. All right, you gave me a Google Music link or a Yahoo Music or a YouTube Music link, and I don't know if it's going to let me download that or not. I'm trying. It is going to let me download it. This is Ballad of a Wobbly by our friend David Rovics. Okay, it's going to let me download that. All right, so we'll put it on then. All right, hold on. Thank you, John. Right? Have another music break. Thanks to John McCarthy and his super chat. So there we go. All righty. So, all right. So
to this country, left Scotland far behind, evicted from the Highlands, told to go and find a new life in America across the Atlantic Sea, where I joined the millions of other refugees who ended up at Ellis Island as the century began. The wretched of the earth from every foreign land. When I came to this country, broken and bereft, I quickly saw I'd have been no worse off if I'd never left. Such awful deprivations as I'd never had to face, born by Swedes and Russians, Africans, and every other race. Millions of people trying not to end up dead from cholera or black lung or being clubbed on the head. When I came to this country to have something on my fork, it was obvious the first thing was to get out of New York. I learned to hop the freight trains, some other stiffs and I caught a westbound rattler to give Oregon a try. Signed up for the logging camps, became a timber beast. If I'd stayed there any longer, I'd have surely been deceased. When I came to this country, I worked the copper mines in Butte. I was a gandy dancer in Spokane in a gandy dancer suit. I heard the rebel girl speak one night in a railway yard. I joined the union right away and got my first red card. Became a hobo organizer for the one big union grand, preaching the wobbly gospel across this starving land. When I came to this country, I soon enough lost track of the number of times I felt a billy club upon my back, or how many times I saw the tents with freezing kids working in the mines instead of living on the skids. How many times I heard the horrid crying from below of those trapped there in the dungeons with nowhere left to go. When I came to this country, it was a hopeful time of desperation. The red flags flew all across the nation. But when the war began in Europe, we refused to die and kill. We refused to fight a boss's war and serve the boss's will. That's when they got the Legion to burn down our union halls all across the land where there used to be 4 walls. When I came to this country, I had no great expectations, but I didn't think I'd end up back here awaiting deportation. On a steamship on the Hudson, I watched the sunset fade, with 20,000 others swept up in the Palmer raids. Counting myself lucky that I'm still alive, remembering the moment that I first arrived. When I came to this country, when I came to this country, when I came to this country, when I came to this country.
All right. Yeah, well, that was about the Wobblies. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. And we talked a lot about syndicalism earlier and the Wobblies, so that was a good pick. Thanks, John. All right. Mika Brzezinski has decried protesters as anti-Semites. Made me think of your history lesson from an earlier stream about how her dad was going around the world fomenting anti-Semitism. That is true. That is true. Zbigniew Brzezinski, her dad, the big Cold War strategist, what did he do? He went around the world, and in Poland, his home country, he, helped form this Catholic dock workers union that was led by an anti-communist guy, Wallachia, who was very anti-Semitic. And then he also helped form a Wahhabi army in the Middle East that was also very, very anti-Semitic and anti-Israel and such. And that Brzezinski advised Obama about how to address the fact that someone on his staff had read the book on the Israel lobby, because Brzezinski had, Brzezinski is actually less trusted by the Israelis. I mean, this just kind of shows this is the party line. The protesters are bad is the party line at this point. But no, I've had people say that I'm anti-Semitic for mentioning Zbigniew Brzezinski. He was not Jewish. He was a Polish Catholic. And I mean, I don't know why people think because it's like it's got a ski on the end of it, that's a Jewish thing. No, that's a Polish thing, right? Zbigniew Brzezinski was not Jewish, right? And he wasn't a neocon either. RFK always says that Brzezinski was a neocon. He was not a neocon. He was more of a soft power guy. The neocons, that's John Bolton, that's Elliot Abrams, that's Irving Kristol, that's Leo Strauss. The neocons are a different formation, right? Brzezinski was soft power, right? He was a product of Columbia University. And Mika Brzezinski was on Morning Joe. I mean, she's saying that because that's the party line. But yes, her dad mainly, was cultivating lots of people in Eastern Europe who did not like Jews and lots of people in the Muslim world who didn't like Jews to be allies of the United States against communism. So yeah, and I've read a biography of Brzezinski, and it talks about that. It talks about how Brzezinski, he advised Obama on how to handle, how to kind of get support from people that were anti-Israel while being pro-Israel. Obama was super pro-Israel, but Obama worked really, really hard to kind of fake out the world and get support from Muslims and others who were anti-Israel. And I think Brzezinski advised Obama on how to do that. So interesting history. Thank you. James Turner says, thanks for recommending To Kill a Nation by Michael Parenti. Yeah, well, it's a good book. It was an eye opener for me. I first read it in high school, it really goes to show you, this humanitarian intervention stuff, how do people just keep falling for it, right? There's always some planet, some corner of the planet somewhere where there's a group of people that are just being killed and America just has to invade to rescue them. Don't fall for it. It's always a lie. The incubators in Iraq, the incubator babies, and Gaddafi and his Viagra rape teams, and it's all a lie. It's always a lie, and it always makes the country worse than it was before. It's always a lie. Don't get fooled again, right? So that's a great book, Michael Parenti. Michael Parenti is a great writer. All right. Do you think that the owners and organizers of global finance and capital will ever lose interest in the West and invest more in the BRICS? I think some will. Right? I think that the lower levels, we'll see that there's money to be made there, right? I think that that's primarily the divide. You have the ultra monopolies, BlackRock, you have, the Rockefellers, Chase Bank, you have the big four super major oil companies, you got Silicon Valley, but you got a lot of lower level capitalists. And I think some of them are bankers. I think some of them even own hedge funds and stuff, and that they just want to make money. And as they see that the BRICS countries are rising, and their economy is stabilizing, and there's more people there with money to spend, they're going to want to invest there. And a lot. China has gotten a lot of investment over the years, right? And that again, we need to utilize that divide because there is a very, very committed, very, very committed pro-imperialist, managerial bourgeoisie, and then there's a lower level of capital that just wants to make money. And as the BRICS countries become more economically prosperous, which they're going to do, there's going to be a lot of people among the bankers and among the American corporations who be like, why can't I trade with the BRICS countries? I can make money doing so. And one of the rules of the BRICS, and this is very important, is if you're a part of the BRICS, you can't have sanctions on any other BRICS country. That's really super important, right? Because that opens the door to just completely busting the entire U.S. sanctions regime. Right, if the Western economy continues to deteriorate, which is happening, and because of all the problems, if China and Russia keep rising, which is happening because they don't have the same problems, they have mostly state-run economy, we're going to get to the point that there's going to be a lot of capitalists in the West that just say we can trade with them, and we need to align with them, and we need them to align with the working class, and we need to build the anti-monopoly coalition. And that's the thesis of everything I've been writing lately. Anti-monopoly coalition. Divide the ruling class. Align with the developing world. Build a working class movement to back up the lower levels of capital in their fight against the ultra monopolies. That's what we need to do, right? Just like in China, how they had, the 4 stars on the Chinese flag were for 4 different classes that aligned under the proletarian Communist Party's leadership. right? You know, and I had a great talk with Jyoti Brar about this when she visited. You know, the fight to win the 8-hour workday in you know, the first major like working class movement. It was the 12-hour workday. In Britain, it started with a divide in the ruling class between the factory owners and the landowners, and the working class aligned with the landowners against the factory owners, and that opened the door to the Chartist movement. And that divisions in the ruling class create an opening for the workers, right? And that the idea we're just going to do it all ourselves, I mean, that's not how revolutions ever happen. There are divisions in the ruling class. We need to exploit those divisions. And the problem with the left is most of the left, they deny it. They think they're just being left, but they're really on the wrong side, right? They're backing up the more imperialist and the more repressive wing of the ruling class. And we should be aligning with the lower levels of capital to build an anti-monopoly coalition. There is also liberation theology in Nicaragua. Absolutely there is. Liberation theology is a wing, it's a Catholic movement that embraces socialistic economics with Catholic social teaching. And it's interesting because a lot of times people think liberation theology just means any Christian socialism. That's not true. Liberation theology specifically refers to post-World War II. In Latin America, you had a lot of priests in El Salvador and in Nicaragua and in Colombia and other places who began interpreting Roman Catholicism in a way that was somewhat pro-Marxist. And my understanding is the current Pope has embraced liberation theology to some degree, but rejected any aspect of it that is interested in Marxism, which is interesting, right? The Catholic social teaching does condemn capitalism to some degree, right? But it rejects Marxism as a godless philosophy, etc. And that the current Pope has talked against capitalism. Many popes have talked against capitalism. But the current Pope has emphasized that a lot. But he also makes clear he's not a Marxist liberation theologist. And many of the great liberation theologists of Central America were very pro-Marxist, and he's not one of those. No, when I was in Venezuela, I mean, a lot of the Bolivarian movement are liberation theology kind of priests, and such. And I mean, that's a big part of the socialist movement in Latin America is liberation theology. Absolutely. They have it in Nicaragua. It's actually in their constitution. They have that. So there you go. So Molly, I just have to tell you, I apologize. I know you probably want an answer to that. I do not talk about that person. I do not engage with anything that person does. That person has not been friendly to us. We were friendly at one point, and he has been very unfriendly. And the orientation that I have is that we just don't, that person doesn't exist. So I apologize, Molly. I wish I could give you the answer you were looking for. But that person doesn't exist. So thanks for understanding. I do appreciate it. But anyway, I do have one last song to put on, and this is "The Water Is Wide" because we talked about it on a recent stream, and it's also another song. I thought it was Irish. It's actually Scottish. So this is "The Water Is Wide." I'll put that on. If anyone has any more super chats or rumble rants, I'll answer them after that, and then we'll end. It was a nice long stream tonight. It's good, but people had a lot of questions. I got to answer them. So if you got anything else, now is the time to play it. While I put on "The Water Is Wide," which is a very slow song. It'll help put you to sleep tonight if you're getting ready for bed. It's a beautiful love song. I'm going to put on "The Water Is Wide," and then if there's any more questions, I'll answer them, and then we're done.
The water is wide, I can't cross o'er, and neither have I wings to fly. Give me a boat that can carry two, and both shall row, my love and I. Oh, love is gentle and love is kind, the sweetest flower she sails the sea. She's loaded deep, as deep can be, but not as deep as the love I'm in. I know not how I sink or swim. The water is wide, I can't cross o'er, and neither have I wings to fly. Give me a boat that can carry two, and both shall row, my love and both shall row, my love and
So there you go. The water is wide. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions, which is fine because we did 3.5 hours tonight. Nice long stream, but great questions, everybody. Great questions. You got me talking about a lot of stuff. We heard a lot of great music. This was a great evening. No one I'd rather hang out with than all of you all. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Here, I'll drop the petition against sanctions in the chat one more time. Go ahead and sign our good friend Phil's petition. He's got a petition he wants people to sign opposing sanctions that restrict healthcare. Always good to sign this petition. Go sign Phil's petition. July 7th, we're having a rally in Washington, D.C., waiting for the details to come out on that. Join the Center for Political Innovation. We're always doing great stuff. We just had a great weekend in Vermont. No, you're fine, Molly. You're fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it. I'm going to have to put on the closing music. So it's been fun. It's been fun. You all are awesome. I don't know what I would do without this online community. You guys are really awesome. And being able to come on here and talk about wobblies and what did we talk about tonight? We talked about global events. We talked about the wobblies. We talked about imperialism. We talked about music and Scotland and all kinds of stuff. It's always a pleasure. You guys are awesome. So I'm going to put on the closing music. Thanks for being here. And I appreciate all of you. We have a very special bond. I'll just say that much. There's something very special about this community.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.